testimony, Africa remains a nexus theater from which the United States cannot shift its gaze. It is home to terrorists who take advantage of conditions in Africa to grow and export their ideology. ISIS controls their global network from Somalia. It is where the Chinese Communist Party actively works to change the international rules-based order as a stepping stone to become the global hegemon. And it's where the Russian Federation seizes opportunities created by chaos and instability. Now, to protect our homeland and the United States' interests, we must deter these nations and their malign actors from their goals on the African continent. Many of our security and economic interests overlap with those of our African and European partners. Successful outcomes enabled by burden sharing are beneficial for all. And as a posture-limited theater, AFRICOM, we establish strength and work towards peace by enhancing the security capabilities of our African partners through a robust system of alliances, exercises, training events, security cooperation, and foreign military sales programs are the backbone of our military activities on the continent. Through these activities, our forces lead by example with a warrior ethos and stand by our partners and enhance trust in the United States military. So the United States Africa Command seeks to match these capabilities with the current and emerging threats to ensure the security of our forces while advancing American interests. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, crisis response forces, counter-unmanned aerial system technology, and integrated air missile defense platforms are critical to accomplish our mission. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome your advocacy in ensuring that the necessary tools are in AFRICOM's hands. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you both for your...
Burkina Faso have. They've not been able to build even more than 5,000 kilometers of road. Today, as we are speaking, when our politicians go around building first coach, second coach roads, he is building asphalted overland roads. How many years? And today, the person that is building roads, the person that is giving hope to the people, we have some people coming from nowhere to tell them that, you know what, we are ready to give you life. In fact, if they want to give life, they should go to Congo, they should go to South Sudan, they should go there, and the mess they caused there, they should go and put it together, take it back to their country. Enough is enough. We are ready to rise up and say enough is enough. It is now. They can never keep us in the fear or the circles of imperialism. No way. We are ready to detach ourselves and say enough is enough. And this is the time that African youth need to read through the lines and see and realize the truth. The same way they did to Nkrumah, they use the same people. And this is a warning that goes to all African leaders. That they sit back and allow themselves to be used by the imperialists. Anytime there has been any elimination of any African good leader, it is great. They use our own people against us.
Just as they are doing right now. And Ivory Coast.
We are sending a strong warning to the Ivory Coast leader. The president of Ivory Coast. If you are a brother and you sit down with our enemy, you become our enemy. Simple. We are not our brother again. Warning to them. Warning to them. And we are sending a strong warning to the president of Ghana. To send a strong warning as far as diplomacy is concerned to the president and the consulate of Ghana for Ivory Coast that enough is enough. We are never going to sit down and allow this to happen again. If we believe in African unification, if we celebrate 6th March, which is our independence, that Nkrumah actually linked it to the total liberation of Africa, we are saying today that as he is a president, they should respect that quote of Nkrumah and also believe in the vision of Nkrumah by sending a message to the Ivorian president that, my brother, you are stepping on the toes of the lion. Don't do this as a brother, because if you do, we are never going to sit back and watch you. If we can't get hold of you, you have your families. Start coming after them. Tell them we are coming.
Last week, Africans both at home and in the diaspora took to the streets in protest. From South Africa to Jamaica, they rallied to demand that Western powers, especially France and the United States, leave the leader of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore, alone. Videos circulating online show Africans across the globe referencing a U.S. Senate testimony by General Michael Langley of the U.S. Africa Command, using it to support their claim that the West is targeting Traore, much like it did with Patrice Lumumba, the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Not since the days of apartheid in South Africa has a single issue united Africans. But is that really what is happening? Can this growing unity among Africans at home and abroad be sustained? And more importantly, can it be harnessed to advance other aspects of Africa's interest? It is 5:30 p.m. in Accra, Ghana, 6:30 p.m. in Lagos, Nigeria, and 1:30 p.m. in New York City. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome to another episode of 90 Minutes Africa. My name is Rudolph Okonkwo. My co-host, Chido Onoma, is on assignment. On our show today, we are joined by Professor Kperogi. Professor Kperogi is an acclaimed scholar, columnist, and public intellectual. He's a full professor of journalism and emerging media at Kennesaw State University in Georgia, USA. His academic work explores the intersections of communication, media, and society, focusing on how marginalized groups utilize media platforms for expression and advocacy. He has authored several influential books, including Global English, The Changing Face of and Forms of English, Nigerian English in a Global World, Nigeria's Digital Diaspora, Citizen Media, Democracy and Participation, which received the 2021 Choice Outstanding Academic Title Award, Digital Dissidence and Social Media Censorship in Africa. Professor Kperogi will join us to discuss Africa's endless search for heroes, Captain Ibrahim Traore, limits of strongmen, propaganda, and imperialism. Please join me in welcoming to the show, Professor Farouk. Farouk, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Rudolph Okonkwo. It's a joy to be back here. I think this is my third appearance.
Yes, and you were the first person to appear on this show, and we really appreciate you for that. I know we always have easy access to you. Anytime we want you to come, you will come. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
All right, so let's start with what has been going on across Africa last week, and it continues today, which is that Africans are protesting. I think for me, I've not had in the last maybe 30 years any issue that united Africans the way this is. From South Africa to Jamaica to New York, everywhere, Africans, those at home and in the diaspora, are protesting about the treatment of this leader of Burkina Faso. So have you been following?
Yes, of course, I've been following it. And I said it delights me to no end. One, because, we have seen in the world, particularly in the West, there is a rightward turn by the youth. And in Africa, we are seeing a leftward turn. The rightward turn here, and several studies have been published, which I have read, about why young men, particularly in the West, are turning to the right. They are becoming more conservative, more reactionary, more xenophobic, more inward-looking, and more resistant to multiculturalism that the West has championed historically. And they said that accounted for the larger than usual number of young people who voted Republican in the last election, and in other Western democracies. And so I've been monitoring that and wondering why young people, there's a saying attributed to, I think, Winston Churchill, but people say he didn't actually say that. But so we don't know who actually said this, but that if you are young and you are not liberal, you have no heart or something like that. But if you are old but you are not conservative, you have no. So basically, it's a saying that they associates liberalism, idealism, transcendence with youth, and associates conservatism, reactionary politics with old age. So, and this is so what has been happening historically in the world is the reversal of what we've known. And I thought maybe this is also happening in Africa, and had thought about that when I read about what's happening in Europe. I thought about maybe that's also happening in Africa. We are becoming more reactionary, more conservative, more resistant to progress. So to see suddenly that a political leader in a small, poor African country is so revered by the youth that he's being celebrated and protected all over the continent, and even beyond, shows me that okay, maybe we are an exception to the emerging historical transcendence of youth in support of progressivism. So it's and what's the basis for his popularity? It's that he has taken symbolic actions that strike a blow at imperialism. I think that's the major thing. Uh, he drove French and American forces out of Burkina Faso. He banned French, although he still speaks French to his people. Um, and so many action, and of course his rhetoric, his anti-imperialist rhetoric, his self-conscious attempt to be seen as the reincarnation of Thomas Sankara, with whom he shares both the same nationality and even ethnic identity. So, and people have very favorable historical memories of Thomas Sankara. Even people who haven't met him, who never lived when he ruled, have favorable historical memories of his work. So the fact that these are the basis for the rise in his popularity gives me a lot of hope. So I want to take it from that very hopeful perspective. And that in the last few decades, he's the first African president to receive this kind of goodwill. It also sends a message to our people. Yeah, and of course, it's also a reaction against this quality of leadership we have all over the continent. We have leaders who are willing tools of imperialism. We have leaders who have no independent, homegrown, people centered economic policies. Whatever they do in their countries is dictated by the IMF and the World Bank. And we have leaders who grin from ear to ear when they have an opportunity to meet with Western leaders whose major concern is getting favorable attention in the West. That's what concerns them the most. Buhari, for instance, Muhammad Buhari, when he was president, he spent a heck of a lot of money trying to get favorable Western media coverage, which Premium Times exposed some time ago. And that's just a representative sample of what happens across the continent. So to find someone who says, I don't care what the West thinks about me, what I care more about than anything is what my people think about me. Of course, there are other things associated with that: the propaganda, the exaggerations, the half truths. But on on the get go, the fact that he has chosen this path is the reason that he's extremely popular, and that gives me hope that the youth of the continent, are fed up with new imperialism. They are fed up with leaders who are lackeys of external powers and would venerate, even lie, to support leaders that depart from this script.
So, looking at aspects of it, you mentioned propaganda, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But in general, are we looking at a generation trying to embrace military leaders, strong men, as opposed to the alternative, which was the direction towards democracy. Is that what we are seeing in Africa?
I think that's a very good question. I would say this, that democracy has not lived up to its promise. I think almost no one contests this, right? That in the 1990s, when there was this fever to return to democracy, it came with a lot of promises that when there's transparency, when there's good governance, when there's accountability, when people have the capacity to choose who rules, then that there's going to be a necessary concomitant, which is development, that the middle class is going to emerge, people's economic situations are going to improve. So there was that expectation. And to be a pro-democracy activist, to be a human rights activist, was seen as a really good thing. And so we embraced democracy with all of these promises. But what has happened over the last couple of decades that we've been practicing democracy is that, one, the economic conditions, the economic prosperity or promise didn't quite happen. In fact, a lot of people have seen a reversal in their fortunes. Two, the transparency, accountability, and all of that, people realize that the civilian administrations that came about as a consequence of the transition to democracy are actually, in substantive terms, indistinguishable from the military they've known. But most importantly, elections, which are supposed to be the distinguishing features of democracy, have turned out to be a facade. A lot of people realize that their votes don't count because either that people who are rich bribe people to get them elected, or that even when people vote against certain candidates, they still win anyway. Or even if they don't win, they use the courts to force themselves onto the people. And so people are beginning to ask questions. So what's in this? What's in it for us? What's the whole point of this thing? A lot of people died in the process of getting democracy, and with the hopes that it was going to usher in prosperity. That prosperity is not there. Even the structural the features of democracy, like periodic elections, where people have an opportunity to change leadership that do not meet their expectations, don't exist. And so we're at a point where people are legitimately questioning the merits of democracy itself. So in that light, when any alternative comes, people are willing to embrace it. I think it was Alexander Pope who once said, "For forms of government, let fools argue. What is best is what is best administered." Something along those lines. I've forgotten the exact phrasing. But basically that what matters more than the form of government you practice is the result of that form of government. And so there's also conversation about, historically, and this was a quote attributed to Ibrahim Traore, interestingly, historically, democracies do not lead to prosperity. It is prosperity that produces democracy. And on the basis of history, he's right. I studied Western Europe. Western Europe was not democratic. It was feudal. It was monarchical. But over time, when capitalism emerged and abundance was created through industrialization, a new middle class emerged. That middle class formed what we now call the public sphere. People were debating. They are belly don't fool, so they could debate. And after the debate, they came out and they said, "Look, we are wealthy, we are prosperous, but why should we allow people to inherit authority? Authority should be earned, not inherited." So, and that was a consequence of prosperity that Europe had produced. And that led to a movement for the enthronement of democratic institutions. So when people are wealthy, when people are prosperous, they go beyond that. There's a famous, even for those of us who are not Christians, the man does not live by bread alone. But that expression, that biblical expression, man does not live by bread alone, implies that we first of all live by bread before anything else. So bread, and that's the Marxist theory, that materialism. First of all, live by bread. And then after bread, people ask for other questions. And that's how democracy emerged. But in our case, we got it upside. We is this like the cart with the cause before the consequence, the cause before the consequence. A reversal. People are not prosperous, and then we foisted on ourselves a system that requires prosperity to sustain. Look at what it takes to elect a president, a lot of the money, the amount of money that is spent on that, the amount of money that is spent to elect National Assembly members who themselves have aides that number in the hundreds or even thousands for a country that is struggling to survive. So that's so the question now is, should we go on this path even when we can't sustain it? And now the conversation has shifted to alternative forms of governance. People will look at developmental dictatorships in Asia and found out that Asia became prosperous not through democracy. Europe became prosperous not through democracy. They became democratic after they became prosperous. So this conversation, I think, is legitimate, but it's been stifled historically because we have been led to believe that democracy is intrinsically a good thing. Anyone who even questions it, must be a horrible person. But after more than 3 decades of, or close to 3 decades of democracy in most African countries, people are beginning to question that, and that is why these military dictators are getting a very, very favorable reception on the continent. However, it doesn't mean that just because they are military or because they overthrew democracies, they are automatically better than what they overthrew. We don't know that yet because we are also victims of military totalitarianism that pauperize the people, that curtail basic freedoms, and things like that. So the military historically has not been superior to democracies. But democracies now, we have seen, are hardly superior to the militaries that they have overthrown. So we are in a state of what I call ideological creative destruction. It's a destruction of what we know of received wisdom. But I'm hopeful about the creative part of the destruction because when you destroy something and it's creative, it means a new thing is going to emerge. What is obvious is that neither military rule as we've known it, nor democracy as we've been practicing it, serve our people. And it appears that a lot of people see these new military leaders as different because of the difference in their rhetoric, in the kinds of things they're saying. They're talking anti-imperialism. They're talking about investing in industrialization. They're talking about educating the people. Whether in fact they're doing that is something for us to discuss. But in terms of the rhetoric, in terms of the emotions, in terms of the optics, they seem to be getting it right.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Let me show you a story in the news yesterday, I believe, out of Nigeria, which is that DSS arrests a Edo activist who was planning to have a protest in Edo State, and it made me to wonder what is the concern of why is the DSS stopping people from protesting in Nigeria to join other Africans who want to support or trying to say that nothing should happen to Ibrahim Traore?
I think for me the answer is obvious, that the contrast between what Ibrahim Traore has been presented to the world and what Nigerians experience right now is so vast, so dramatic, that it could detonate a social convulsion if a protest is allowed to take place. What do I mean by this? See the contrast between a president who arbitrarily and precipitously removed petrol subsidies because he has been told to do so by the World Bank and the IMF. You know, this is the IMF. That's their template. Every government, it's a one size fits all solution to every problem, from Latin America to the Pacific to Africa. Take away the subsidies, let the people fend for themselves. So there was nothing Tinubu did that's particularly new. That has always been the case. So anyone who says remove subsidies without any concern for the effect of those subsidies, the removal on the people, we know where that's coming from. And he beats his chest and says he's proud that he was bold, that he was inspired. He didn't even think about it. As soon as he got onto the stage, he was just gripped by unusual inspiration, by an epiphany, and he says subsidy is gone, and that was it. So he still thinks that was something, and people know the consequence they're living with. You know, people can't pay school fees, people can't eat, the middle class is gone, it's been hollowed out, and you have that's on the one hand, and on the other, someone here who is saying, I don't want an IMF loan or the World Bank loan because it comes with conditions that are injurious to my people. You know, that's one of his symbolic actions that, you know, a lot of people love. And he says, to hell with the imperialists. I'm going to invest in our people. And so that contrast is dramatic, is wide, is compelling. And the narrative that this guy is the kind of leader that we need, you know, puts to shame the Nigerian president, and I think several other presidents. So they are probably thinking that, should we allow a protest of the kind that are taking place all over the continent and even the historic diaspora like Jamaica and elsewhere, that it's going to dramatize the neo-colonial government in Nigeria and might lead to whatever, you know, they don't know whether it has a direct effect on the governance in Nigeria. And I think that's probably what's going on. And yeah, I haven't made an entry into their minds, but there can be no contrast more striking than that between someone who opposes imperialism and Western dictation and one who embraces it and you know, flaunts it with pride.
All right, let's see a little bit of more of that protest, and then we'll come back.
Faso hands off President Ibrahim Traoré, defender of African unity and dignity. Today, we raise our black fists high across the earth to say no more to the colonial puppets, no more to the slave masters hiding behind Western suits and fake diplomacy. Ibrahim Traoré is the voice of the people, a son of Africa standing against exploitation, theft, and lies. Burkina Faso is not for sale. Africa is not for sale. Our indigenous people are not for sale. To our brothers and sisters at home and abroad, remember the spirit of Sankara, remember the spirit of Garvey, remember the fire of Nani, Samori Touré, Dessalines, Empress Taitu, and Emperor Haile Selassie I. We will not bow, we will not break. We are the storm they cannot stop. On April 30th, the youth rise, the ancestors rise, Africa rises. Hands off Burkina Faso, hands off Ibrahim Traoré, black fist in the air for liberation. This is not just solidarity, this is war for the soul of our people, a war of truth, spirit, and divine revolution. Rastafari TV Network stands with the righteous defenders of freedom, Africa for Africans, at home and abroad.
All right. So, watching all this, which one is real? Which one is not real? I know that the Western nations, they've not been nice to Africa. They've done a lot of bad things in Africa. But the way this leader of Burkina Faso is being promoted, what do you make of that? All these stories. I don't want to play some videos about claims of him building planes and building um, building things that I know that the country. Let me read this out for some people who may not know. The GDP of Burkina Faso is 20 billion. Per capita is about 888 dollars. Is 185th out of 193 countries in the world in the ranking of poverty ranking of the world. So, what do you make of this presentation? I think it's to some extent it's really propaganda in terms of what he has accomplished in this period that he's been there.
Yeah, that's I made a passing reference to the half-truths and propaganda that are deployed to lionize him and to get him to be loved by our people. So let's separate two things here. That he has taken a lot of symbolic steps that are praiseworthy, that are commendable, that have provided the raw materials for our people's self-pride, self-regeneration. So no one can question that. For instance, his rhetoric as well. He rejected, it's a fact that he rejected World Bank IMF loans. That's a fact. Two, he reversed the increase in the salaries of senior political and military officers that his predecessor had approved. But and some other symbolic actions took that are really praiseworthy, admirable. But there are a heck of a lot of things that are not true. And I'm saying they're not true, not just based on my reading, but also because, my mother was born and raised in Benin Republic. And the part of Benin Republic she comes from shares a boundary with Burkina Faso. And I have a cousin who lives in Burkina Faso. We had a long conversation. We always have long conversation about Burkina Faso, even before he took over. And just 2 days ago, we talked for a very long time. And he says for a lot of them, this propaganda about what he's supposedly doing in Burkina Faso is a source of mirth, source of laughter. And we talked about when, through a laundry list of things that are flying around on the internet about things he supposedly did. And so a lot of people, they laugh. So no, that's not true. But for instance, the idea that he increased the salaries of workers, this guy said, no. On the contrary, he has forced workers to part with 1% of their salaries to help with the revolution, to fight the insurgents. And two, he said, freedom of speech is gone. It's completely gone. Anyone who criticizes the administration, gets arrested. And he told me about 3 journalists who have been conscripted forcefully into the army because they criticized his handling of the terrorists in the country. At least 40% of the country is still controlled by terrorists. It used to be 60%, so that is now 40%. The government says it's just 30%, but most estimates say it's 40%. I mean, that's commendable, but anyone who criticizes his tactics is forcefully conscripted into the army and then thrown to the battlefield. So that's been going on. So right now, the only gathering that is allowed is gathering that sings the praises of the president. And that, in fact, a few days ago, someone came out and said, look, Traore, you have done so well that it's completely justified if you steal the money of our country, because you represent us. You are our manhood. You embody our aspirations. And if you steal it, it's fine because it belongs to you. You are us. That sort of thing. The other propaganda, and I think a lot of this propaganda that many Africans generate to account for why he's an exceptional, transformational, transcendental leader, uh, uh, just laughable. Just 3 days ago, someone sent me a video of an incident that supposedly happened, that Tinubu invited Traore to Nigeria to attend a peace meeting between ECOWAS and Burkina Faso, but that meeting was inspired by France. France wanted him to come to Abuja so that he would have been arrested and killed, but that he told Tinubu that he will get back to him. And when he conferred with his close lieutenants, they decided that they were going to send a representative, but that the plane that took the representative to Abuja, appeared to be him on the plane. And that as soon as he got to Abuja, the French soldiers were there, that it was all over the news that he had left for Nigeria to attend a peace meeting with Tinubu and all that. So as soon as I got there, I stopped and I searched the internet for any news story of Traore, of any headline saying Traore was going to Nigeria. I found none. I went to the French, something, it was none. Then I said, okay, maybe something. So I called my cousin and I said, can you help me check the headlines in Burkina Faso? If there were any headlines that this guy had left, he said, no, this story is entirely fabricated. No such thing ever happened. Not even, this propaganda doesn't even exist in Burkina Faso. That is something that someone somewhere formed. And they used AI the voice was of a white man. The text was obviously generated by ChatGPT. And then they used the voiceover of an American. And for a lot of our people, white is right. Black is, of course, whack. So when they see a white man narrating this fantastical story, they believe it. When I first heard it and I told someone that this first of all is not true. How would they know about all these things, his flight and the French people coordinating with Tinubu's people and then agreeing, and then they saw, how did they know this? Who gave you all these details? And they said, no, didn't you see who was narrating it? This is real. This is even coming from the Americans themselves. That's not true. There's another propaganda about Obama writing a letter to him and saying, thank you, my African brother. You are making me proud. You need to stand your ground. Our people. So this was sent to me by a retired general in Nigeria. I said, Farouk, is this true that Obama wrote a letter to Ibrahim Traore praising him? I said, General, I haven't heard this, but it's easy to tell that this is fake. And this was on YouTube. So I started from the very first minute. I said, I'll confirm, but this has to be fake, because if Obama wrote such a letter, it's going to be all over the news. But what is striking is that in these two videos that I've talked about, I read the comment. The first thing I do is to read the comment to see maybe someone is smart enough to point out and say, no, this can't be true. I read until I was tired. Not a single person was able to spot that these were fake stories that were generated. So, and these are just two examples of things that are going around about things he supposedly did, but which he never did. So I think this is all in the service of presenting him as this unusual, uncommon, transcendental leader who has the interests not just of the people of Burkina Faso, but of the entire African continent at heart, who should be supported. So I started by saying I like the drift, the leftward drift that young people have taken, because it comes with major positives for our people, which is positive self-construal. What the positive self-construal is that a lot of post-colonial societies, particularly in Africa, struggle with the concept that anthropologists call the cultural cringe. Cultural cringe has also been called xenophilia. Xenophilia, cultural cringe, these are all tendencies for people to think very lowly of themselves, to have very low self-worth, to have very diminished self-esteem, and a corresponding veneration of the foreign, particularly if that foreign is also white. So whereas in the West, they have the problem of xenophobia, we have the problem of xenophilia. Philia comes from the Greek word for love and phobia for fear. So our people have been infected by a toxic cocktail of xenophilia and low self-worth for a very long time. To suddenly see people being sufficiently proud of themselves and of a leader who goes against this trend, for me, it fills me with joy. We first of all need to see ourselves as humans who are equal to every other human before we can even make progress. But when this is sustained by lies, by manufactured propaganda, I think it undermines itself. And so that's what worries me about this Traore mania. What worries me about it is the lies, the propaganda, the half-truths, and the outright falsehoods that are invented to bolster him, to elevate him. And the fact that no one is questioning this, and that anyone who questions the facticity of a lot of these wild claims is called an imperialist, is called all kinds of names. And so people are afraid to even come out and say, hey, look, this is a great guy, he's doing great things, but let's be careful. Because if the narrative that you are using to bolster him, to elevate him is a lie, everything crumbles. There's enough true but symbolic things he's doing that can be used to make him, the lion that you want him to be. But if you're using falsehood to do that, then he crumbles. And when he crumbles, he probably will not be able to rise from that fall.
There is this common one about him rejecting 200 mosques that Saudi Arabia wanted to build in his country. I don't know if you've seen the video of that one or the commentary on that one.
No, I have not.
Okay. All right. Let me do something else because it's not just people on the street that are making up saying these things. Yes. There is a story from Niger, I think it's Niger, that is also based on because the way they talk about the Sahel, the three leaders in Niger and Burkina Faso.
That watch. USAID was in,
this is
and
Dr.
education improved. Show me what country where USAID was in and healthcare improved. The social services they are bringing, it's peanuts. The American taxpayer needs to know the billions of dollars that are being given to USAID, a fraction is making it to the people. Let's look at what HIV/AIDS was used to do. We know of a program that was run out of South Africa where they actually were injecting people with the virus. The reason some of the AIDS virus spread as rapidly as it did in Southern Africa, there were some very dirty games being played on African people. They were using Africans as guinea pigs for experimental activities. Even when you look at every aspect, they're using us as guinea pigs. Yes, there is some good, a percentage of some good, but not all of it is done with good intentions. You look at agriculture, they're destroying African agriculture by introducing those GMOs. You plant your seed in one season, your soil is finished. We used to have seeds that we can use from one season to the other. The introduction of GMOs through these agencies, USAID is one of them. We're destroying Africa in a massive way. A little good is coming out, but by and large, the end result, they mean no good. They can turn around and give us an inventory and say, as long as you have been in Africa, and also other parts of the world, show us your success rate. You claim you are helping governments with education and healthcare. Show us your success rate. But I also turn around and say, African governments, why do you need this little aid to assist you in providing proper healthcare, proper education? The average African government can afford to provide those services for their people. Why does such a continent that did so much to help Europe recover continue to be so poor? Let's be realistic here. Let's not talk about peanuts. Africa does not need the aid. What we need is for those who are exploiting Africa to stop. Africa has everything it needs. If Africa could have contributed as much as it did to the recovery of Europe post-World War II, why wasn't Africa equally developed? This is a wake-up call to the African leaders to take inventory of what is really happening in their countries. Do they really need the peanuts that are coming in as aid? What is really going out? If I may use the example of what happened in Niger, when the government decided they were going to take over the mining of their uranium. The French companies that were mining the uranium were paying the government 80 cents a kilo for the uranium, and then turning around and selling the uranium to the rest of the world at 200 euros a kilo. So that one move from the Nigerian government to say we are now going to take ownership of our own uranium, they went from realizing about $1 billion in uranium resources to over 300 billion a year.
This was where I woke up. I was watching all these things and people are saying this. I mean, Dr. Arikana, I like her, and she started talking well. And then when she said that, I had to stop and pause and say, how is that possible? That uranium they were selling it for 80 cents. Now they are selling it for $200 a kilo, and they made over 300 billion. No, I just said no. This is not possible. If Niger made 300 billion, that would put them on top of the richest countries in the world. So I had to go and I said to myself, okay, how much do they sell uranium now, a kilo? And I checked, it was 148, okay? 148 was the highest price in the last 1 year. Today, it's actually 130. And I said, so even if they did this contract and they got a better deal, the company that is extracting this will not sell it at 130 and give you the whole money. There's a cost associated, there's profits. How did they make 300? Who paid 300 billion? I don't know, but you can't argue with Africans because they don't just want to believe. They need heroes.
Yep.
Can you talk about it?
This is what we call self-comforting lies. So, like the woman, I have trouble pronouncing her name, but just like you, I have a lot of respect for her. She has done tremendously well in waking people up, people of African descent, in instilling pride, in calling attention to the structural injustices in French West Africa particularly. It was through her that I got to know about the dependent arrangement that French West Africa still has with France, where a lot of the money they make is not actually theirs. They keep their money with the French central bank, and when they need that money, they have to apply for it and pay interest, on money that was generated by them. So, we have to give it to her. She's done a lot in raising awareness about injustices against our people, about structural and systemic and racist system that exists between French West Africa and France. But just like we said the last time before we played this, the tendency to spice things up with little lies just to make them easier to swallow, undermines everything. My father's immediate younger brother used to say something like this. He said you can have an immaculate body of water that is beautiful, great, and you can just drop can just put a drop of excrement. He said it spoils everything. So he was talking about the importance of, consciously being clean and maintaining integrity in what you're doing, because there's a temptation to say, look, it's just a little lie. Since everything is largely true, I just insert a little lie. That doesn't affect anything. And he would say, look, if you put a little excrement in an immaculate body of water, would you say, well, it's just a little excrement, the body is still good, the water is still good? That was what he used to say. And that thing endures in my mind to this day. May he so rest in peace. The implication of these little lies, in the case of Traore, they're not even little, some of them are huge lies, is that they cause people to question the entire basis of everything you've ever said. And they say, okay, if this is untrue, how am I sure that the other things that I'm not able to verify is actually true? And that's not to say that we don't make mistakes. Every human being, so long as you're a human being, you will make mistakes of facts, and sometimes unintentionally. But what differentiates the person who makes unintentional mistakes with the person who makes intentional propaganda is that the intentional propagandist doesn't apologize even when they're called out. And when that happens, you, as I said, you destroy the very basis, the very foundation of your narrative. And this is why I see it all over the internet, of these wild, fantastical, improbable claims about the machismo of these military leaders. In fact, a few days ago, we were discussing with my friend, cousin who lives in Burkina Faso, to tell you the basis, how this thing is destructive. We are discussing these wild claims. He's a French West African, but he's very educated in English and reads stories from all over West Africa and Africa, both in English and French. And so he was talking about these falsehoods that are being told to lionize the Sahelian military rulers. And since he lives in the country where a lot of these lies come from, for he a source of mirth, sort of laughter, source of comic relief, he said, and he's a younger person, he said, okay, so if people are saying this about this man right now, how are we even sure that the things we read about Thomas Sankara are true? Were there also some propaganda made about him that were not questioned because no one cared? People it was comforting. People wanted it to be true, and they assumed it was true, and it was unquestioned. And I had to hold in there. Then I say, okay, I see where you're coming from, but a lot of the things said about Thomas Sankara are verified. And I had to send him, and a lot of people have written about Thomas Sankara, his policies, and all of that. I had to send in an article to say a lot of those things are verified. But there's a basis to question that. If this guy did these little things here, but then you tell multiple lies to magnify and amplify these things and extend them beyond the bounds of reason, you cause people to question so many things. And the whole point, I'm a communication scholar, so I need to bring this in here a little bit. It is what has happened in the last couple of years. The informational ecosystem has changed very dramatically. We used to have what we call the oligopolistic media formation, where you had big name, historical, traditional, institutional media organizations dominate the media landscape, and other people merely reacted to the stories that they wrote. Social media came and destabilized that. But even with that, it was still a little, it was a symbiotic relationship. They provided raw materials for social media chatter, and their reporting is also informed by the chatter that takes place on social media. But what has happened in the last few years is that all of that has collapsed. And that, first of all, people who don't like the dominance of the oligopolistic media, who don't want fact checking, who don't want the institutional and symbolic power that these news institutions hold, sowed doubts on them. They say they are fake news. They do not report the truth. They are paid by someone and all of that. So over the last few years, there has been a gradual collapse in trust that people have in traditional media. So in its place, we have multiple loci, multiple centers of informational power. And like right now, everything has been decentered, as scholars call it, the decentering of the informational sphere. And when something is decentered, anyone can be anything. Anyone can be the source of information. And so in that light, propaganda, falsehoods, they emerge and they thrive and can influence decisions in ways that no one predicted. So when this rightward turn in the West among young people has been attributed to this, you find that podcasts by nobodies, by people who have no intellectual power, who have no symbolic power, who have no institutional power, who don't even have any cognitive abilities, but because they're able to appeal to certain raw emotions, suddenly they get even more views than CNN or NBC or NPR or any of these things. And people assume that, well, this is so self-evidently stupid that no one will believe it. But no, narratives are built by feelings, not facts. That's one thing that people didn't realize. Narrative architectures are built by feelings and not facts. So if you think that people are mistaking facts, that they are so obviously xenophobic, so racist, and so misogynistic that no one's going to believe them, you're lying, because they are appealing to the feelings of people. And since the media landscape is decentered, anyone can believe anything. So we are at that stage right now where we have multiple centers of informational power, where the center no longer holds, where there's this seemingly irretrievable collapse of the familiar ways of seeing the world, of passing information, of circulating knowledge. We are at that stage now. That's why you really cannot tell who is an influencer or whose views are going to percolate and inform thought processes and attitudes and values. So in that something, we don't know whether there's going to be a realignment of forces back to sanity. But if you look at that historically, that's what typically happens when there's going to be a dramatic shift, a paradigm shift. It's always preceded by creative destruction, by destruction that now from the ashes of that destruction, something new emerges. What is going to emerge after this moment, we don't know. But we are at a stage where there's no center. And so all of this is taking place. That's why you go to a patently false and mendacious YouTube video, and you're going to read 2,000 comments, and not a single person says, this is not true, this is not real. Because every person there is there. The people who are there are drawn to that because that's what they want to believe. And so we have this information, this silos, this echo chambers. And within those echo chambers, dissent is frowned upon. In fact, it's punished. No one dare say, hey, no, that doesn't make any sense. And that's where what we call the spiral of silence comes in. People are quiet, not because they don't see the absurdity in the claims, but because they are afraid that if they call it out, they're going to be labeled, they're going to be misidentified, they're going to impute negative motives to what they are saying. And so they don't want to be the object of attack, so they keep quiet. And because they kept quiet, no one talks. And then there's the illusion created that this must be true. Look at, no one is even challenging this. If I didn't have superior knowledge of the issues, merely reading the comments on on a lot of these propaganda videos lionizing these Sahel leaders, I would say, well, this got to be true. How can you read 3,000 comments and not a single person say this is true? If I think it's not true, maybe something is wrong with me. I may have been imperialized in my thought process to the point that I think this is not true. So, hey, this has to be true. But because this is my training, these are things I study. I know that it's the effect of what's called the echo chamber effect, the silos that are created that invite really interested people, motivated people who are motivated to certain thought processes, certain patterns, certain points of views. That's what they do. And so, but because things might change, and I really love the fact that people, for the first time in a really long time, are taking pride in themselves, in their race, and are celebrating the leader that they think represents this tendency. I want this to be sustained by the truth, by the facts, not by falsehood that feed certain feelings.
All right. We we did 1 hour before we even got to Nigeria and other topics. But before we leave this entirely, I want to play the video that most people have played when they talk about what is happening in Burkina Faso. Let me play it so that you can see.
So, in which the ruling elite of a country is receiving gratuities on the side that inure to the benefit of the strongman leader and not to the populace of the country. Does that sort of corruption and bribery go on with regard to the Belt and Road?
Absolutely, Chairman. I see this, and I don't mind calling them out, but Kperogi and Burkina Faso, as they know that both, whether it's their gold reserves, that is all those proceeds are just in exchange to protect the junta regime. There's a number of examples across. Even in Sudan, what's going on with the rapid support forces and Burhan of the Sudan forces, when you get down to it, is all about the revenue that can be drawn out of that. And there are nefarious actors in the CCP or in sometimes Russia are complicit in those activities.
So, what's wrong with Ibrahim Traore protecting himself with the resources? That's a question that Africans are asking. Why is that an issue for the Americans? But then there are people who are saying that's an indication that they want to kill him. What do you make of this? Because all over, people think that sometimes I saw the man speaking English. Does he speak English?
No, he doesn't.
How can no? I was able to get. I said to myself, okay, maybe he learned English just like Tinubu will come one day from France and learn how to speak French. But why will he be speaking English to his people who, as far as I know, they don't speak English in that country? How would they understand him, even if he learned English on his own? So these are the things that people don't question. People just accept every video they see out there. But talk about this general. He has been called names. I felt he's been called names by
well, so first of all, I think what happened with the English videos, the BBC called the video a deep fake. It turned out that it's actually not a deep fake. So he did speak with his people in French, and then someone took that video and superimposed English translation to it. So what is it called? Dubbed English to it.
Okay.
It appeared as if he was one speaking English, when indeed he was not. So when the BBC fact check realized that what he was saying wasn't consistent with the sounds that were producing, they called it deep fake. But it turned out that the video of him speaking was real. It was not deep fake. He actually did speak with his people and said almost all the things that he said in that English video, except that the voice was dubbed so that he could speak English. But the fact that the person who shared it didn't indicate that this was
translation of what he was saying.
Saying
It made it look like he was speaking English.
Exactly, made it look like he was speaking English. And then for people who know that they don't speak English in Burkina Faso, and that the man himself doesn't speak English, it shoots the credibility of the video down. But to go back to what the general said, of course, people say self-preservation is the first law of nature. So there's no reason why he shouldn't protect himself. Of course, he will protect himself because he also knows that whoever kills by sword dies by sword. He did not get there because the people elected him. Although I question the utility of elections in most of Africa, because the elections now don't reflect the ways of the people. But he was through a coup and then another coup. He was part of the first coup, and then he overthrew the guy who led the coup that overthrew the civilian administration. So he is acutely self-conscious that he's a marked man, not just by the West, but also domestically. I mean, you cannot overthrow a civilian administration and another military dictator and be free, because, those people want power too. And that fact that you are in power at the expense of their laws suggests that you should be prepared for the consequence of what you did. So he, of course, will be self-preservationist, self-protective. And this is true of all countries, of all leaders. You want to protect yourself. To expect that he won't protect himself because he's Traore, I think is very naive of the guy. But why it's important is that I guess maybe why you're asking the question is that the impression is given by his propagandists that this was a guy he's so self-assured of the rightness of what he's doing and of the support of his people that he doesn't need to spend a dime to protect himself because he's already going to be protected. So to that extent, he's just human. It just shows that he's just as human as anybody can be. Although we have tried to, the people who love him, try to present an image of a superhuman who transcends our familiar frailties, who doesn't care about protecting himself, who is so loved by his people that they're going to go out of their way to protect him. But I see why a lot of people are particularly leery or even angry at what the general said, and that's based on historical memory. The historical memory of the murder of African liberation leaders. Patrice Lumumba, there's no one who is African who has not read about Patrice Lumumba, of his fiery rhetoric, of his Pan-Africanism, of his love for his people and of Africa, and how he ended up being killed by his own people. Thomas Sankara is from that country. Thomas Sankara's successes as a leader for 4 years are very well documented. Everyone knows that. No one contests that. Even people in the West talk about how he transformed the country, instilled self-pride, tried to industrialize within the limits of his resources, liberated women, gave women education in ways that had never been seen in that country before. And then suddenly he was killed. And people attribute his death to, although he was killed by his cousin, Kperogi, but that there was foreign hand in it. Nkrumah is another hero of the Pan-Africanist movement, and people say he was transferred. He was his ouster from power had the imprimatur of the CIA. So based on this and several other examples that we cite, is historical memory, and that historical memory of the fate of past African liberation leaders is what informs this heightened sensitivity to what this guy is saying. I think there is that's what I'll say about that.
All right. One last thing before we move on. The USAID came up in the same hearing on the Senate floor here in the United States. Let's watch that encounter.
About the withdrawal of USAID from Africa. Have they commented to you like, why are you doing this? Or
Ranking member, thanks for that question. I went to the Munich Security Conference about a month ago, or greater than a month ago, and after I got my direction from the Secretary of Defense, what my priorities were, especially counterterrorism and also to deter China and their military activities on the continent, it kind of refined my mission. Then I had to come up with my narrative to engage these countries, be very transparent and straight talk of that we're going through the pause and we're in a reflection period of assessing what has worked in the past and what's going to work in the future. And what's going in the future will be more targeted to what their needs are, but they also need to be able to build towards a sense of independent operations. I expressed this and talked to Cote d'Ivoire, their MOD, and even in Ghana, the new president-elect, President Mahama. They understood that and also carried on that narrative. They appreciated me being transparent. Carried on that narrative when I went to Morocco as well, when we delivered the helicopters, and they understand it. And so it's more of a burden sharing type message, and also a regimented message of getting towards the host nation coming to the point of independent operations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, he went on to talk about what the Chinese are doing, that the Chinese are learning from what worked, what they were able to do at the USAID, and try to use the same model to influence Africa. So in a way, he was trying to warn the Americans, the Congress, that one of the tools we use to influence things in Africa, we've lost it, and that our competitors, the Chinese and the Russians, are deploying the same tool, but they are not as efficient as we were. So what do you make of this whole Africa, the scramble for Africa? That's what it's called now. There's a second scramble for Africa that is already going on with the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans, while some Africans believe that the Chinese are harmless, the Russians are harmless, but they are all the same, So
that's true. That's, in fact, when you invited me to this program, one of the things that I said I was going to talk about, I hope we'll talk about, is the fact that the lions of the Sahel that we venerate and worship and praise to high heaven, we are not questioning the fact that they are ditching one imperialist and accepting another. Malcolm X was very famous for saying that between the sheep and the what's the fox and what's the animal, he said one growls at you, the other one is quiet, but they do the same thing. They're going to eat you. They won't have you for a meal. And Russia is very present in a lot of these Sahelian states, and Russia is not Father Christmas. They are not Santa Claus. They are not benevolent. They are not benefactors of anyone. They are there. They are in it for themselves. Same with China. And so I hope we get to the point where our interest should be us, not change one colonial or neo-colonial oppressor with someone who uses a different name, but basically does the same thing. So that's one point I want to make. And the second, in response to what this man said and how you recharacterize what he said, is that the USAID and a lot of these soft diplomatic maneuvers that the United States have been doing in Africa for all these years are not benevolent, value-free interventions. They are not. And when I was interviewed after USAID withdrew from Nigeria, from Africa, and was AIT's diplomatic show interview. And I said, look, there's nothing, the loss is more to America than it is to Nigeria, because the soft power that they had over our people, it's gone. And I recall an anecdote that I had been told by someone, a very good friend of mine who were classmates at Bayero University, Kano. He was a prince of an emirate in Taraba. And he told me something. He said, Farouk, let me tell you one thing that my dad taught me, my grandfather taught me. He said, if you want people to respect you without questions, go to a restaurant when they're eating, pay everyone's bill. Say, how much do you pay? Just pay their bill. He said there's nothing more embarrassing to a man than for you to pay their bills. But, he said it does two things. I mean, it saves them money, but it also buys you their loyalty. He said if you pay someone's meals, for someone's meals, even if they are fighting you, even if they hated you, there's a limit. When they want to fight you or want to insult you, they caution themselves. And I said, oh, this guy pay meal. Is it because the meal, it's very personal. So you can buy clothes and all, but meal, to pay for someone's meal, you have him by the jugular. So, and say you go out and something, he will go out and something, he'll say, whatever, he say, cashier, come. How much is everyone's meal here? Because he had more money than we did. And he would say, so when he ran for president of our association, he won massively. And he had told me that right from the time we were in 200 level. I have never forgotten it. And I keep reminding him once. Like I said, there's something he told me once that I have never forgotten, which is so true. Pay for someone's meal, you buy their loyalty, even against their wish. And that's what USAID had been doing. When you give people money, and so when you pay for someone's meal, the fact that they are in a restaurant means that they already have the money to pay it. So what USAID has been giving African countries is not something they could, it's not that if they don't give them, people will die. It's not something they could do without. But it's an addition anyway. But what it does more to the person who gives it than to the person that it's given to. So by saying, I'm not going to give you any more, you are free the people. You're giving them independence. They can say to your face, you are an idiot. And there's nothing lost because you are not even giving anything. In Nigeria, we say, now papa, they feed me. Now you they feed me. That's the response to rudeness. Now you they feed me. That feeding, the fact feeding, is very central to determining the contours of my mouth and what I say and what I can't say. So if they decide to stop it, frankly, I actually I welcome it. It's good. It means that we have the capacity to say no to some of their policies. There are a lot of policies that they impose on our people that are injurious to our people, but that our leaders cannot resist because they are being fed. Their meals are being paid even when they can afford to pay that meal. It's the loyalty that paying for someone's meal buys. That's what they have lost. And Russia is getting it. China is getting it. And so the reason Traoré is very popular is that, at least as far as the West is concerned, he's saying, even with USAID, we don't want your meal tickets. We don't want your meals. We don't want the money you are giving us. We are self-sufficient. We may be poor, but we are self-sufficient. And that's what people think, oh, this is great. But of course, he's also getting meals from Russia. And Russia is likely to dictate what he does, what he says, and what he doesn't do, and what he doesn't say. And that's the part I want us to be self-aware of. While we praise him and give him credit for charting a new course in African liberation struggles, in liberating our minds and our thoughts and our actions.
We take a break. When we come back, we're going to come to Nigeria. We talk about Tinubu, the new terrorist group in your region of the country. We talk about the Hausa and the Fulani and the new divorce that is happening in the northern part of the country. And everything, Sheikh Tinubu, Natasha, everything else. So we have a big conversation coming up. So let's take a break. We'll be right back. right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for staying and joining us. We're having a conversation with Professor Kperogi. Now, we start with Tinubu. Next month, this month, sometime this month, it will be 2 years. He's been in office. What do you think? How do you rate him?
Well, so far so bad. I think that's going to be my one sentence summary. I judge the quality of any leadership by the quality of the lives of the people they say they are governing. And as I said in one of my columns, not even the most desperately unthinking, brain dead Tinubu supporters would deny the fact that his 2 years in office have been very detrimental to the masses of our people, to the vast majority of people. Whether that's going to change is still up for debate, or it's left to be seen. Maybe maybe there's some magic that we don't see that is cooking. And as I always say, each time I express cynical, pessimistic views about Nigeria, I'm always hoping that I'm going to prove wrong. That someone's going to say, see, in spite of your pessimism, in spite of all that you said, you see the result? And I'm always looking forward to be proved wrong, so that I will say, oh, I'm sorry, I was very short-sighted. I didn't, think beyond the surface. So I'm still hopeful that maybe sometime I'm going to be told that, you see, in spite of all of the skepticism you expressed about the steps that the government is taking, they told you they are just experiencing temporary pain for a permanent gain. That I'm going to see that permanent gain. But for right now, and based on what I have experienced in Nigeria before now, and my studies of other countries that have implemented these same policies that Tinubu is implementing, what we get at the end of the tunnel is not light. It's hell. It's infernal. Because there's nowhere on earth where the gutting of subsidies and the devaluation of the national currency simultaneously has ever led to prosperity. What it has always led to is the hollowing out of the middle class. What it has always led to is mass pauperization. And then, of course, the enrichment of the already rich. That it narrows the circle of people who have access to wealth, to resources. So for me, that matters to me more than anything else. But when you add that to other symbolic things, other optics of governance, of concentrating power within a certain class of people that are connected to the president by virtue of location and ethnicity, then it gets even particularly worse. And it appears that in Nigeria, every subsequent president is worse than the previous one. I never knew that Buhari would ever be missing. People will be missing Buhari. But I recall mentioning that sometime in one of my columns, and people came for me. And I said, people are going to miss Buhari at some point, not because he's good, but because the president who succeeds him may be worse. And people said, please, we don't. That's a curse. Please withdraw it. During Jonathan's time, it was so horrible that if anyone said we're going to miss Jonathan, you're going to be cursed. But Buhari came and made people miss Jonathan. And now people look back and say, oh, you see, we lost because we kicked Jonathan out. Not that the success of Jonathan was worse than Jonathan, but now it has been reconstituted to mean that he was great. And we just weren't smart enough to see his greatness and replaced him. But it wasn't that he was great. The economic indices were the worst at the time. He was worse than Yaradua. Yaradua was worse than Obasanjo and all that. So but I frankly did not think that it was going to be this terrible. And I had warned several times. And at some point, it appeared I was some fuddy-duddy Marxian communist, feel-good person who just didn't understand how economics worked. And I was saying, if we remove subsidies, what's going to happen? The only thing that Nigeria has that people benefit a little from is petrol. And we have been told that this narrative was built. It got to the point that all the major presidential candidates said subsidies should be removed, that we didn't, it was a fraud, that there was no reason why it should exist. And I said, okay, let's see how it's going to play out. What has played out now is that, one, people are paying more for petrol than they have ever paid. And that has led to multiplier effects. The price of everything has gone through the roof. People are not able to afford basic things. And with the devaluation of the currency, everything has become worthless. People are writhing in a hyperinflationary conflagration. Now, you might say, if these are sacrifices for something better, maybe it's worth it. But what do we have in place of the removal of fuel subsidy? One, governors now have more money than they had ever had. And I listened to one interview where Tinubu was bragging about this as an achievement. Now governors have more money. So basically, that's reverse Robin Hoodism. You take money from the poor to enrich the already rich. So the governors now have more money. What are they doing with that money? They're not building.
I wanted you to hold on first. Are you saying, is it real money, more money? Because I've heard that from people who support the government, saying that the governors have more money. But if you convert that to real money, actual currencies, I'm talking about dollars,
yes,
they get more. Is it not less than what they were getting? And can they do a lot more with that money?
That's a very interesting question. That although they have more money in Naira terms, that money doesn't really translate to a lot before the devaluation of the currency. So that's one layer of the complexity. Another layer of that complexity is that they're not even using that money for anything. A lot of them are not even paying the minimum wage. And what is worse, and this was a report from Business Day some time ago, and they haven't disputed it, is that when they get this money, they convert it to dollars and for safekeeping, for personal use. And so that puts pressure on the Naira, on the dollars. And, a lot of and so it creates this artificial scarcity of dollars because the governors buy up the dollars, and that increases the value of the dollar and reduces the Naira. And so that's one aspect. The other aspect is for the federal government. What are they doing with the money, the extra money? No new roads are being built. No new hospitals are being built. No new schools are being built. And even for the existing schools, we are not seeing a renewal of the infrastructure of the schools. But then that's another one. Then let's go to the third one. Maybe if all of that is still happening, yet the government is no longer borrowing, maybe that means self-sufficiency. We are still borrowing from all the international financial institutions. In fact, by one account that I read, we are borrowing now more than we ever did when subsidy was there. So you ask yourself the question, so what was achieved with this? Nothing. The only thing that's achieved is that people have been pauperized, the middle class has been decimated, and life is a living hell for a heck of a lot of our people. And it wasn't as if this was not forewarned, it's not predictable. I came of age during IBB's regime, and when he removed these subsidies and devalued currency, and I remember a lot of the rhetoric that was used to justify is exactly what the people here are saying. You need temporary pain for a permanent gain. And we waited until IBB left. The gain didn't come for 8 years. And I wrote a column where I made reference to South America, because South Americans also embrace these IMF World Bank policies of devaluing their currencies and removing subsidies. They did that from the 80s, and that continued until late to the 90s. this region of the country used to be, relatively prosperous. They went into very deep seething poverty. So historically, in Nigeria, it has never favored us. Elsewhere in the world, it has never favored anyone. Right now, Argentina is another country that is executing almost the exact same policies that Tinubu is executing, and we know the result. In fact, the other day, a Tinubu administration spokesperson was playing up the torment in Argentina as a propaganda issue because Atiku had come out to ask Tinubu to copy Argentina. And then, so when Argentina has imploded, because they had a crazy president that led what he called a chainsaw revolution. That's cut government, sack people from jobs, cut transport subsidy, food subsidies. People now literally eat from the dustbins. I mean, this is not a metaphor. Dustbin. People know what's going to that, but unlike in Nigeria, people are going on strikes to protest, but nothing is changing. We know that that country is in complete turmoil, economic turmoil, political turmoil, and now a spokesperson of the same government that is introducing the exact same policies that Argentina is now saying, hey, look at Atiku, this is the country you said we should copy. See what's going on. I had to write a column to call his attention to the fact that it's not different. What's going on in Nigeria is not different from Argentina. Just that Argentina has more international coverage. Of course, in the international press, in the business press, and I'm sure you can testify to this, Rudolph, they present Nigeria as a country that is doing well because they want what is going on. They say they never fail to mention he has taken a bold step to remove whatever subsidies, and he has a more realistic evaluation of his national currency. Even when they talk about the once in a generation cost of living crisis, which they can't afford but mention, they will always bring it down by making references to these commendable steps he's taken. If you don't live in Nigeria and you read about what the effect of the policies of Tinubu in the Western business press, you think, oh, this is on the right path. The same thing with Argentina. You see what they say about the Argentina's economy and what people right there, the real living, breathing people are going through. There's such a wild and wide disjunction. So for me, governance should be about people. Are they happy? Are they better now than they were earlier? That's what governance should be about. Everything else is just razzmatazz. But on that score, I wouldn't say he's doing well.
All right. One of the aspects I wanted you to weigh in before we move on to that specific issues is the issue of cyber crime law, cyber bullying law. I don't know if there's any, you are a media professor on media. Why is the Nigerian law like that? Is there any country else in the world where anything is called cyber bullying and people are arrested and thrown into jail for criticizing government officials?
Not many countries. A lot of, everywhere in the world, in most places of the world that at least aspire to be or claim to be democratic, libel is a civil case, which means, you don't go to jail for it. You pay a fine for it. The cybercrime law that was passed, interestingly, by Jonathan, Goodluck Jonathan, that a lot of Nigerians have been made to lionize and to present as this blameless hero of democracy and tolerance. He passed that law, in 2015, and was going to use it, but he lost an election. But that law was passed during his time. it's actually an unnecessary repetition because we already have libel laws. And it's very clear what constitutes libel. All they had to do was tweak it and to say that publication, because publication in traditional libel law means that something has appeared in a medium, and traditionally that was newspapers, radio, television. If anything that was injurious to someone's reputation appeared there, that was considered the basis for a lawsuit. So update it to say venues for publication are not limited to these places. It can be online and all these other places. But arresting someone for libel, whatever you call it, that's not consistent with the ethos of democracy. And when it came out, I recall criticizing it after it was published, after it was passed into law by Goodluck Jonathan. But it was used by Buhari. And part of the cyber law says even if you insult the president, and that was what Omoyele Sowore was accused of, insulting the president in a media interview. And that's like an anomaly in a democracy. And what makes it even more ridiculous is that they even say they call something hate speech. And this, I'm sorry to use the word, idiots don't even know what hate speech is. Hate speech is not a speech that targets someone in government. Hate speech laws were created in the West to protect minorities, numerical minorities, symbolic minorities, political minorities, cultural minorities, sexual minorities. And it's understood that because of their numerical inferiority, because of their symbolic inferiority, they are going to be the objects of attack. And it targets people like ethnic minorities, gays, lesbians, who don't have, in almost all societies, or religious minorities, people whose religion is so little that they can be trampled upon by the majority. That's what so any speech that denigrates them and provides the rhetorical raw materials to visit physical violence on them is called hate speech. So hate speech has to do with protection of minorities. In Nigeria, they understand hate speech to mean a speech or anything that is any insult that rankles the emotions of the powerful. That's a complete misunderstanding of hate speech. There's nowhere in the English language where hate speech is understood the way our leaders understand it. And they put it in the law. It's very embarrassing.
One more thing that's similar to that, blackmail. I hear people say that someone is blackmailing them because he wrote. I don't understand. How did we define blackmail to mean if I say something you don't like or something about you is blackmail? What happened to our English? You wrote a book about Nigerian English. How did that happen?
Yes, that's the. I think there's in Nigeria it's led by people with with people who are influential. They use an expression in a certain way, and then everybody else copies them. And no one questions whether what they say is actually true. Say, for instance, Google. Nigerians don't say Google, and they say Google, and that's because someone. And I say goggles. When I was growing up in Nigeria, we had goggles that we wear. But now I say I'm going to Google it. The first time I heard it, I said, "What does that mean, goggle? You want goggles, the glasses? How do you?" So it's the same thing. So blackmail, I think they are very literal. When you mail and then blackmail, when you paint someone black, you are blackmailing them. So I think that's how, yeah. So they don't understand that this word has a specific meaning. And that's why I put Buhari's spokespeople on the spot when they said Buhari was being blackmailed. So I said, oh, so Buhari to be blackmailed as a president, you must be doing something really horrible. And you don't want them to expose you, and they are using that thing to buy your silence. You know, blackmail, basically, it occurs like someone has a nude picture, or they committed something that they were not supposed to commit, and you have access to it, and you say, okay, give me this or I expose you. That's blackmail. But apparently, our people understand blackmail to mean painting someone black.
Yeah.
That making them.
I wrote an article and someone will come and write, this is blackmail. You're blackmailing this man.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that's true. And I think, you know, as you said, I've written a lot about this. And sometimes, you know, when a word takes on a meaning of its own within a locale, there's almost nothing you can do about it. There's no amount of correction. If the community of speakers, or what we call the speech community, decides that this is what we want this word to mean, that's what it means. Even if it departs from the mainstream, that's just the way it is. So I've come to terms with that, with the fact that in Nigeria, when they say blackmail, they don't mean blackmail in the way that other English speakers in the world understand it. They mean insult. That's all.
All right. So over the past week, we've been having this conversation here about the Hausa and the Fulani and other ethnic minorities in the northern part of the country. It appears that something is going on. What is going on? Tell us, because I know you are from that area. What's going on?
It's a very profound, consequential rupture in an age-old historic relationship. You know, there's nowhere in the world that I've seen the extent of ethnic co-mixing, of ethnic hybridization that I've seen between the Hausa and the Fulani. And interestingly, we talked about Traore and Thomas Sankara. So there's a part of Burkina Faso where the Fulani and the native population, they are called the Mose people. The Mose people, whose language is called Maure, that's where Ibrahim Traore comes from. They form 52% of the population of the country. So they are the majority. The Fulanis are a significant minority there. But there's a part of the country where the Fulani and the Moro people, the Mose people, merged and gave birth to a new identity. So that's where Thomas Sankara's father was from. So that name, they also have, it's also hyphenated. I've forgotten the name of the something there, but they don't call them by the Mose Fulani, but it's a hyphenated, but it's a smaller size of the population. So Thomas Sankara's father was from there. So if you look at Thomas Sankara, you will see that he has Fulani features. His face, the sharp features look like Fulani, but his father was actually a mixture of that. So we've seen that on a huge scale in northern Nigeria, particularly in the northwest, where after the jihad of the 1800s, the native Hausa population and the Fulanis have merged. There's a lot of intermarriage, a lot of cultural mixing, to the point that it's no longer easy to tell who is Fulani and who is Hausa. Let's give the example of Muhammad Buhari. His father was Fulani. His mother was paternally Kanuri and maternally Hausa. But he himself is culturally Hausa. He doesn't understand the word of Fulfulde except what he picked up. He doesn't understand the culture of Fulani people in the same way that he understands the culture of the Hausa people. So his first language is Hausa. But the Fulani that he claims as an ethnic group, he can't even live, he doesn't understand the cultures, the linguistic codes, the cultural codes. And so he's there. He's just an example of several other kinds of people with that kind of identity. And when we interviewed him in 1999 in the Weekly Trust at the time, he said he loved the phrase Hausa Fulani because it represents the complexity of his own identity. He said, I'm Fulani, but I don't speak a word of it. My mother is not Fulani. I'm Fulani because my father is Fulani. And so I'm bringing some of these examples to show you how, although the monarchies, the traditional ruling families in a lot of northwestern cities and towns are Fulani after the jihad, those emirs themselves, the language of the palace is Hausa. They don't speak. They have stopped speaking the Fufu. That's the Fulani language for centuries. And when the Western press, when the Southwest press used the phrase Hausa Fulani to capture that identity, initially there was a resistance to it because they say, "Hey, in Africa, you are where your father is from." Now, this rupture, so this relationship, this unexampled ethnic and cultural hybridization that has taken place over centuries is rupturing because of the emergence of banditry, particularly in rural areas. So a lot of the bandits and they are nihilists. That is to say, they don't have any coherent ideology. They just criminality. And they target, in rural areas, they target Hausa people in their farms. But if you listen to them themselves, they say they are the victims of systematic exclusion in Hausa society. That's the Fulani Ndaji, the Fulani of the bush, and that they do not benefit anything from the state. They are also the victims of cattle theft. So it's like an egg or chicken situation. Which one started what? We don't know. But right now, a lot of the Hausa people see themselves as victims of banditry perpetrated by Fulani, and they think it's because of their ethnic identity that they are being, that this is happening. So, there's a documentary done by the BBC that won an award. That's a very intricate, deep dive into this relational dynamics. So what it has resulted into is that people are suddenly saying, I'm not Fulani, I'm not Hausa Fulani, I'm Hausa because I can trace my descent patrilineally and I'm Hausa. So stop talking about Hausa Fulani. And then the Fulani who don't speak the language, a lot of them from my interaction are mystified where this is coming from because they don't speak the language. They are culturally Hausa. And before now, everyone in the north used to be called Hausa. In fact, to the point that even Edo people, Bender, the Auchi people, used to be called Bender Hausa because of their Islamic identity. So Hausa was a term that was used to describe that identity. But over time, when Buhari became president, there's a shift to Fulani. No, people no longer talk about Hausa, they're talking about Fulani. Everyone's Fulani in the north. I even wrote a column that I call the Fulanization of the North by the South. Because suddenly, people in the South call everyone Fulani. Just so long as you're a Muslim and you're from the North, you are Fulani. It's worse if you have a little light skin. Oh, you are Fulani. So the urban Fulani people who are culturally and linguistically Hausa are wondering where this is coming from. But that documentary gives really good insight into that. And that's the banditry that's taking place. Now, you know what is, it's that there's a rhetorical reversal. Increasingly, Hausa people are saying, before the Fulani Jihad, we had a very well-established civilization. We had a monarchical system that was the pride of our people, that people studied and wrote about. And that when the Jihad came, it did nothing except to replace the kings in the palaces. The structure of the emirate was established by Hausa people hundreds of years before this Mandela Jihad. The people they displaced were Muslims. They have had Muslims since like the 13th century. Islam became the official religion of Kano in the 14th century. That's like how many? That's like 400 years before Usman Dan Fodio jihad. So they're saying this was not a Muslim jihad. This was ethnic cleansing. This was an ethnic jihad. And suddenly they are questioning even the motives of Usman Dan Fodio. And you see that, on social media. I wrote a column about that. And when the Sultan of Sokoto said social media was a terrorist, he was basically making reference to that. A lot of the things that are said by Hausa people on social media, many of them I can't even say here. They are really explosive, and I read them. I have friends from both sides, and people share some of them with me. Many of them I cannot even share, and so I think the Sultan sees this, he reads this, and he's alarmed by the rupture that has taken place, that has led Hausa people to say these really explosive things about Usman Dan Fodio, whom, whoever you are in northern Nigeria, so long as you're a Muslim, was seen as this revered figure who could do no wrong. But suddenly, I'm just going to mention this, that people are comparing him with Shekau, the Boko Haram guy. There was a post that went viral within House phone circles that said he was just a more successful Shekau, Abubakar Shekau, the Boko Haram guy. That's what he was, nothing more. And that he did not bring Islam because Islam had already existed. He even learned Islam in Hausa land. He didn't bring it from wherever. He was born and raised in Hausa land and learned Islam in Hausa land, and they had the Muslims. So that's right now what's happening. And there's no precedent for this on this scale. Of course, when human beings live, there are always differences that people identify and say, oh, you are different from me. But in Muslim northern Nigeria, for the most part, the unit of mobilization, the basis for identity is religion. If you're a Muslim, it doesn't matter whether you're Fulani or Hausa or even Igbo, because there is, for instance, someone in Kano in 1992 whom Kano people loved so much that they wanted to become the governor. It was his rejection, not because he was for anything, but it was his rejection as the SDP presidential candidate that made Kano people vote for NRC in protest. And guess the ethnic identity of that person. His father was Igbo. But of course, he was Muslim. His father converted to Islam. He was born in Islam. His mother from Kano. But everyone knew he was patrilineally Igbo, and they wanted him to be the governor. But because of intra-party shenanigans, he was pushed out, and someone else was the candidate. In protest, they voted for NRC, but in the presidential election, they voted for SDP. So that's how Northern Nigeria has historically been structured. So long as a Muslim, everything else, is ignored. But now suddenly, a part of the country that has that history, Shekarau, who was governor 2 terms, he has marks from Babur, that's from southern Borno. And if you know anything about the geography of northern Nigeria, the cultural geography, southern Borno, most of them are Christians. Southern Borno is like 60% Christians. But he became governor for 2 terms. Although I saw an interview where he said he was in Babur. But at least that's acknowledged. And then we also Sabo Bakinzuo, who was also not Hausa, historically, he became governor. And now suddenly there's a conversation that all the governors from the Northwest right now are Fulani, except for Gombe. I mean, most of the governors in the Northwest and Northeast are Fulani, except for Gombe and Adamawa. But of course, a lot of that is historically not true, because even the Bauchi governor is not Fulani. He's he's one of the indigenous ethnic groups, but his mother was Fulani. So, the claims, just like we have talked about, the people build narratives with feelings, not facts. And so the idea that all our representatives are Fulani people, suddenly we need to get back the Emirates. They're saying they need to reverse the Emirates. And Usman Dan Fodio's descendants who are all over, they should be replaced by Hausa people. That's narrative you see on
Is that possible?
Well, So because I'm really deeply inserted into this conversation, but as an observer, they point to the emir of Daura. The emir of Daura was after the jihad. The emir of Daura was Fulani, but I think that it was reversed by I think it was the colonial people, and so the current emir of Daura, the stemma, the ancestral stemma is Hausa. So so they talk about him as in the northwest as the only prominent Hausa emir, although the emirate had been Fulani until I forget what happened, that the colonial officers removed the Fulani person and looked for the family, for a member or a descendant of the families that had ruled that place. And so it's a source, it's a rallying cry, a rallying point for a lot of Hausa activists, because they say, that's like the spiritual headquarters of the Hausa. If you know anything about Hausa history, you know that's where it's supposed to have started, from where you have the other people went to Kano, Rano, and all these other places. So the fact that the spiritual headquarters of the Hausa people is ruled by a Hausa person is a source of pride and also inspiration that the imposition of Fulani as a ruler can be undone. So whether that can actually happen in other places, for me, I think it's quixotic. But one of my friends who actually we were very close friends in Kaduna when we lived, and we actually shared a bedroom. I mean, a 2-bedroom. He lived in one, and I frankly didn't even know he was Hausa, because everyone was mixed. Everyone is mixed, and so he had been, feeding me with this thing, and he said we can do it, and I said, how can you do it? And I couldn't even tell him. I said, how do you even know you are Fulani? I mean, you don't have. I said, of course, I can trace my roots patrilineally to a Hausa man. And a lot of time when people say they're Hausa Fulani, they are mostly Fulani people who are saying that, because they don't want to say that they are Fulani people. For those of us who are Hausa, we don't want our identity to be hyphenated with anything, because there's nowhere in the world where that happens. And so there's a lot of conversation right now, debate, and people say, what of the Anglo-Saxon? That identity, these are two different ethnicities brought together. Of course, that's not true. The Anglos, and the Saxons from Germany, what was old Germany, they understood each other. They spoke different dialects of the same language. It's like this: the Igbo spoken in say Nsukka, and that spoken in maybe Enugu. At least you understand each other. You just say, we don't say it like that in my place, but I understand what you're saying. And then the accent may be different. So that's what it was between the Anglos and the Saxons. They were basically the same people. Even the Jutes who joined there were basically the same people. So there's a lot of debate right now about that. And it's not just social media. It is even in the offline world. And that's why the Sultan was saying social media is a terrorist. And people didn't understand him. I really wanted to write a column about that, but the issues came up and displaced that. But I hope that I'll have a chance to write that. He wasn't talking about social media in the sense in which people understood it. He was talking about social media being used to sow division and to undo centuries of coexistence between the Hausa and the Fulani people.
All right. I know our people have been waiting, and we've done 2 hours without them getting involved, and they are not happy. I can see some faces in the studio.
Okay.
But I have to ask you one more question before I go to them. This Sheyi Tinubu and Nance president.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you follow the Natasha and the new lady that came out, Sandra Duru, who calls herself Dr. Professor Mbweke on social media. Natasha came out to say that she didn't know this person. People are, how do we as a people, because once something like that happens, when Sheyi Tinubu is saying, I never met this guy, the guy is saying that we were in the same hotel, I came to Lagos, I met him, and how do we break down how would the society go forward, know the truth? What will be the final thing that will happen so that people can say, this issue has been resolved, and this is what we learned from this experience?
Unfortunately, earlier in our conversation, I talked about the dissolution of the familiar structures of the information ecosystem that has taken place over the last few years, which makes it difficult to know what the truth is, what falsehood is. So alternative facts and truth are colliding. And we're at that point where knowing the truth is really hard. When I read Sheyi Tinubu's denial, I said to myself, he said, I have not knowingly met this guy. And that phrase struck me, knowingly known this guy. Maybe he's afraid that someone might bring evidence of them together so that he will say, well, my denier said knowingly. So I saw him, he probably came around, but I didn't even know who he was. So I found that very telling, that in denying any knowledge of this, he had the need to use the word knowingly. But to tell the truth, I'm not in a position to say with any certainty whether he's lying or whether he actually met him. But for me, it's significant as a communication person that of all the words he could use, he had a need to use the word knowingly. And we so it's we are waiting for how to see how this unfolds.
What about Natasha?
To tell the Natasha case, I don't know, for some reason he really doesn't interest me that much, so I didn't follow it. I saw social media posts about that, and I was wondering who this is. And Nigerians have a habit of making social media posts that assume that you know the background of what they're talking about. So I kept seeing a reference to this person, some people calling attention to her ethnic identity, some to her academic claims, and I really didn't have the energy to search it up to see who is this person they're talking about. I know Natasha and Akpabio, I followed the issue, not intensely, but on the surface, because it really strikes me, frankly, as something we shouldn't detain our attention on.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's get our people in. If you want to join us, turn on your camera. I see a lot of people in the back end, but if your camera is not on, we are not going to bring you up. Let's begin with historical patterns. Ovie, you're first. Your question for Professor.
Thank you, our guest, for your time. Don't forget Dr. First. But you have, for the sake of conversation, man, you have said many things. I mean, I enjoyed the conversation from international back home. But let me start by saying I disagree with you in everything you said. And I will tell you, I disagree with everything you said. And I'll tell you the premise why I said that, then you can take it from there. Now, historical pattern, as as my name portrayed there, I think your analysis, right? Your analysis are in tune with the happenings of today, but there's no correlation with your analysis with the reality on ground of our reality. Now that's why the historical context come in here. At the height of agricultural revolution, this thing led the rest of the world to come and tell what civilization. They came to civilize in the name of civilization, right? Then fast forward at the top, at the peak of industrialization, America toppled them and came with what? Democracy. Today we are at the peak of information revolution. The Chinese are here selling us building infrastructure and all that. The Russian, the same thing, they are selling security. What do these people, all these era have in common? It's what? Act of benevolence. And I like the fact that you ended that section with a phrase that says, blessed is the hand that gave it than the one that take it, right? That's what you ended that with. Then in your analysis of Tinubu, even though you agree the policies that have been implemented are not ours, then the fact that you are expecting anything from him, question, that's why I said your analysis is lacking relatability to our reality. With the historical context that you are not going to disagree with, how these people have been coming over the years. So also, let me say I agree with you on your conclusion about Traore, which is just a form of distraction to all of us here. Now, again, coming to the Fulani aspect, you said that the Fulanis who are in the bush, according to our friend here, Pulo, there are 75% of them in the bush, that they don't have coherent ideology. But on one hand, you said the invasion of the Sokoto Caliphate, the cause of the Diadis, it's pretty much the same pattern. I'm quoting you now, pretty much the same pattern of what is going right now, destroying farmers, killing people, and overthrow. That is exactly how Sokoto Caliphate was overthrown, according to your analysis. So to say that the Fulanis who are in the bush today, in the name of Elderless Man, don't have coherent ideology, is to say that the Islamic ideology does not relate to any one of them. So where are you in this? Then the structure of information that you are saying that is being eroded, those structures were built for a reason to actually get us acclimatized in nation state, which is not our idea anyway. Again, that's where the idea of USID come from, right? Soft power. So if the structure are being destroyed now, who is destroying them? It's not us, it's not Traore, it's not anybody. It's still the same people that build it. So it is not destruction, it's replacement. So what is replacing it? It is what we are seeing today. A man who the gun that is hold that is protecting him, he don't even know how to protect it. At a time that war is going to be autonomous. If I want it to ride me, nobody will know. So, but at the same time, we are all carried away with that. So, with all your analysis, 40 years from now, if you want to tell your grandkids that what are we talking about when we are being colonized again, is this how your analysis is going to be?
I'm not even sure you've said anything, frankly.
Exactly, this is my point. You did not say anything in 2 hours. You did not say anything in 2 hours. Exactly my point. Thank you. Thank you for answering my point.
My brother, this guy, he just wants to talk and he talks. That's fine.
Exactly what you did for the past 2 hours. That's what you did for the past 2 hours. You said nothing.
Thank you so much.
I didn't say anything. But I think, but maybe I can say a little thing about what he said about the Fulani lacking a coherent ideology. But the first thing you say is just.
I didn't say that. You said that. You said that, not me.
Yeah, no one says this is what is called a verbal blizzard, where people just bring the words together without care for what they mean and whether they are communicating any sense. But but that's okay. That's verbal gymnastics. You want to talk and you've talked. But what I mean by Fulani people not having the bush, what do you call the bandits not having any coherent ideology, it is that just 2 days ago, they went into a mosque, pulled out the imam, murdered him. And there have been several such cases of invasion of mosques in Katsina, in Zamfara. These people, they kill people while they are praying. In my hometown, just 2 weeks, I think I wrote something about that. If you follow me on you see it there. The bandits came there and they killed 6 Fulani people. They themselves were speaking Fulani, the Fulfulde language. And 2 other people died as side effects. They were not the main targets. So how do you explain people who are imputed with having expansionist Muslim expansionist views going into the mosques and killing imams and murdering people? And if you go, I was saying to someone a few days ago, just Google Fulani herdsmen, Mieti Allah. The number of Mieti Allah chairmen that have been kidnapped, in some cases killed, by these same people. So what typically happens is when they go to the south or to the middle belt, where there are Christians, and they kill and they do something similar. The human mind, we have what is called chronically accessible constructs as human beings. It's evolutionary. We're evolving to be conscious of our neighbors so that we can have snap judgments. And when something happens, you use what happened in the past as a basis to make snap judgments so that you protect yourself. So if you feel any person comes and kills people, they're going to say, oh, these Islamic militants have come. But when they go and kill other Fulani people, and that's where the narrative of the Hausa people, gets a little messy. Because if you say the Fulani people are killing only Hausa people because they're Hausa, how do you explain this imam? And his name, the Amnesty International showed it there. You could see clearly he was an imam. I mean, he's an imam. He was Fulani for his appearance and for his names, but he was an imam and he was killed. What do you attribute that ideology to? Nothing. That's why I call it nihilism. Nihilism is violence that is not informed by any coherent ideology. And I can give you multiple empirical examples of Fulani in the bush. In my hometown, what do they call these people? The vigilante groups that were formed to fight many of them are Fulani people. One of the chiefs of the vigilantes was murdered in my mom's hometown, and that guy was a Fulani guy. He was the head of the vigilantes. He was killed by other Fulani people who are bandits. What do you attribute that to? So it's not even ethnic, it's not religious. It's just nihilism. People don't want to, they don't want these facts to get in the way because they build narratives. As I said earlier, narratives are fed by feelings, not facts. So I work with facts, and the facts don't support the idea that there's a coherent Fulani ideology to take over land and impose Islam. A lot of these people are not even Muslims to start with. They live in the bush and they don't even know anything about Islam. And I can tell you that for a fact, because these are facts I'm working with. But these are not favorable to narratives. They are not.
All right, thank you.
How did they take over Sokoto?
Ove, you are done. We're moving
on.
on.
It's contradicting him.
Jefferson, you're next.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Farouk, thanks for having me. It's nice to have me here. And thanks for having me, Mr. Rudolph. I've listened to your session so far, and Farouk, with due respect, I want to say you make me laugh. Because I will tell you one thing, there's a saying, even, I don't know if it's Bob Marley that said, he said, you can fool some people sometimes, but you cannot fool some people all the time. Why am I making this statement?
It's all the people all the time.
Yes, yeah. Why am I making this statement? Before the advent of Boko Haram, it all started because they wanted to come out of what they call it, Haram, Western civilization and all that. So that happened and all that. And then it happened under, what they call it, it started small under Obasanjo's time. It happened in Yar'Adua's time. Then, of course, it went full ballistic under Jonathan's time. And if we remember, when we had Yejirika as the chief of army staff, they wanted to wipe out insurgency. And guess what? With due respect, some Muslim leaders were saying an attack on them is an attack on the North. The news outlet is there for public knowledge.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Unfortunately, this happened, and in fact, from Jonathan's time, even up to Buhari's time, when we thought everything would die down, it came up and went, and the thing metamorphosed into Fulani headsmen, banditry, and all that. And ever from that time till now, we have had no peace. Unfortunately, we have had no peace. Unfortunately, hold on. Unfortunately, even the Northerners that are aware of all these things, unfortunately, it's even affecting them more than us. I'm from the South. Now, I'm not trying to paint a narrative. You see, in Nigeria, what we want is protection of life and property. That's what we want, right? Irrespective of where we come from. But unfortunately, these things have been abused. You say that there is no agenda, but I can tell you one thing. There was a time in Imo State, I don't know, they were trying to bring homeless people, that is somewhere in Mbise. But because of how these things can be, because of the narrative that we swept in, the people resisted it, because we know that if they were brought in, from there it will result into something else. And unfortunately, as I speak to you, there's a lot of security issues happening in Enugu as we speak. Killings, aimless killings all over the place. Nigeria is not, some things are going out wrongly. You understand? And that's because our
Absolutely.
leaders have totally neglected the fact that security is a major thing that is for everyone.
All
Can
right.
I respond?
Jefferson, thank you. We have to be aware of time for everybody. It shouldn't be.
Yeah, so
So
very quickly, I think you are mixing issues. One,
No.
Boko Haram has nothing to do with Fulani heartspring. These are completely different issues. You are mixing them. And so let me tell you why you are mixing them. Boko Haram is a Kanuri thing. And the Kanuri are different from Fulani people. Historically, they are even enemies. Because what? The Usman for the jihad wanted to go to the Kanuri people and they said, look, we've been Muslims in the 9th century before you have been. And so they fought. And one of the few places that Usman for the jihad didn't succeed was the Kanuri side. And so there's the historical animosity. Of course, it has been resolved now. They have a joking historical relationship. So Boko Haram, you're right. Your characterization of Boko Haram is accurate. It started small during Obasanjo's time. During Yaradua's time, the military killed their leader. And that video went viral, as viral as it could go at the time. It was shown on YouTube and all of that. And then it became violent from that. And you are right that their motive is they want to establish an Islamic emirate within the Northeast, and if possible, the whole of Nigeria. But that has nothing to do with Fulani heartspring. Fulani and Kanuri people are completely different people. And these are different strands of insecurity that are taking place. And you are right that there is insecurity in every part of the country. But the point I was trying to make to show that this is not a coherent ideology in the sense in which people tend to present this, that just like you've admitted, the North suffers even worse insecurity than the South. In fact, the Fulani people themselves suffer a lot of insecurity. A lot of them can't go anywhere. And so I encourage you to watch that BBC documentary, and you're going to see this about how this insecurity pervades everywhere, including places that Fulani people live. So if you want to say it's a coherent ideology, that's fine with me. It takes nothing away from me if that's what we believe. But I'm working on the basis of facts. If Fulani people are killing Fulani people who are also Muslims, and they're also killing others who are not Fulani and who are non-Muslims, it's difficult for me to attach any ideology to that, or coherent ideology. But if you think that represents ideology, fine. It's not something that I'm going to waste my breath arguing over.
All right, thank you, Jefferson. We can let you no follow because we have a lot of people we want to get to them. We have only 20-something minutes left. KJ, go ahead. Just get your best question and ask when we bring you on. That's all we ask for you to do.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Farouk. I enjoyed listening to you. You took me on the journey, and I like that. I like also your power of rhetorics and academic prose. Well done.
Thank you.
And that brings me to my first question. Or rather, let me just ask one question since Rudolph wanted me to ask more than
just one, please. Yeah.
Yes. I enjoyed your all that you said. I enjoyed it, even though like over here, I will not agree with most of it. But I want to also say to you that the BBC documentary, I will not be too serious about it because these people have always been known to pander to one particular direction in Nigeria, reporting about Nigeria. So for me, it will not be something I want to lay hold to. But now, where I am going actually is in your first instance when you started the interview. It seems to me, because sometimes when people attack the social media, you and Dr. Rudolph, what I see people trying to do, it's like those of us who are in the academy, we are afraid of losing our grip on knowledge and understanding, custodians of those who know what is supposed to be said to the society and build it. But right now, the social media have opened that space up. So it's not only you, Professor Farouk, that has the ability to determine what truth should be and what society should look like. Am I right to say that you guys are afraid that the society now wants to decide for themselves what is good, vis-a-vis what you think as an academic, that this is the right direction to go? And I know you read wide. If you read the story of the writings of Wole Soyinka, you find out that most times he doesn't take you to the direction. He leaves you to determine what you think the direction should go. Are you now saying that we should now be the ones pointing to society where they should go, even if the society don't think that where we academics are taking them are where they should be going to.
Okay, first of all, let me correct your understanding of the documentary I'm making reference to. That documentary was researched and narrated by someone, a Nigerian from Zamfara. His father is Hausa, his mother is Fulani. And so all the thing he has done is from his perspective, from his research. This is not some white guy who sat in London and did a documentary. And that's why I'm saying do not work on the basis of assumptions, because assumptions can mislead. So you now assumed what the BBC documentary is based on what you think BBC does.
No, I'm not thinking. Sorry, I don't want to cut you. Just 1 minute. I also do documentary. When I start to do documentary, I know where I want to start and where I want to end. So I can decide to mark it out.
I want you to judge. I wanted to judge the documentary on the basis of what you have watched. I watched it from the beginning to the end, and I think it was very informative. And what he said at that time is playing out now. At the time he said a lot of those things, they hadn't started playing out in the public. So going back now, it's like a retrospective look into it and say, oh, wow, we missed a lot of things that this guy pointed out. It was very dangerous. He spoke with the bandit leaders, spoke with Hausa communities, and then used his own experiential data to shape this narrative, because he's from Hausa father, Fulani mother, who grew up in that sort of society. And then the second thing you say, that's such a wild leap. That's such a wild interpretive leap. I was talking about, I studied information, and I'm talking about how falsehoods are manufactured and how they circulate. For instance, are you going to contest the falsity of these things we make reference that Dr. Okonkwo and I referenced? When someone said, did Obama write a letter or call Traore? No, certainly he did not. So if I call that out, it doesn't mean that I'm saying social media people are naive to believe it. No. Or the fact that he was invited to Nigeria in cahoots with France so that he would have been apprehended and killed. Did that happen? Were there headlines saying that, oh, he was on his way to Nigeria? No, that didn't happen. But people believe it. So because social media has democratized access to information and has decentered the power of information and persuasion, I should keep quiet and say, oh, this is just as legitimate as any factual information. No, that's not the way it works. I have written a book. The last book I wrote, Digital Dissidence and the Social Media Censorship. I acknowledge some of these things, and I call that the demotic term in the informational system. That is that the power to determine who is persuaded and who persuades has been taken away from the traditional centers of power, that ordinary people are now in charge of narratives. I acknowledge that, and I see that as progress. I'm not bemoaning that someone is sharing that power with me. I don't even think I have the power to shape any opinion or to persuade anyone. No. In fact, I love the democratization of knowledge. If I had had several debates with people who thought before then that Wikipedia was horrible, and I said, no, Wikipedia makes access to information, to knowledge, that used to be limited to a few people who went to school. Now someone can Google and go to Wikipedia and get information, but now that's even getting way, way, way more with AI. That fills me with joy. I am not contesting that. But I'm saying at the same time that people are gullible and can be taken advantage of. So when you have these transparently, demonstrably untrue things being said and written and circulated, and the vast majority of our people believe them, I will be worried. You should be worried as an academic as well. Because when falsehood replaces truth in the service of ideology, then a lot is lost. That's just my concern. But I love the fact that the centers of persuasion are being democratized. I love it. I celebrate it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, KJ. Let's go. Before I bring in Michael, I want to take a question from the comments section. Farouk, this question says, is the Hausa Renaissance a good development?
Oh well, that's a difficult question. That's a value loaded question. I don't whether it's good or bad depends on the use to which it's put. It's always good for people to have self, you know, to raise their self worth. We talked about one of the reasons I love the current celebration of Traore is that it has instilled in our people a sense of self pride. But if that sense of self pride, does not also include hatred for others, that is to be welcome. So if being Hausa, gives you pride and you want to reclaim that, because historically, what happened to Hausa people, they are monarchies which had centuries of history behind them, which were elaborate. Their learning was all wiped out. And for a very long time, people felt that being Hausa was something they shouldn't embrace. So if embracing it gives them sense of self-worth, that's great. But if it becomes the basis for hatred for others, then we'll be concerned. So that's the answer I'm going to give, short answer that I'll give to that. And that's not just for Hausa, for everyone. I want people to take pride in who they are, because you can't help being who you are born into. That's not a choice you made. So you have to learn to take pride in it, because that becomes the basis for how you relate to other people. If you feel worthless, you're not even in a position to relate to others on the same level. So it's something that I encourage, that people should have pride in who they are.
All right, thank you. Michael, you're next.
Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
All right. I call you Professor Farouk. You are a genius in your aspect of things that you've analyzed and put forward today. My question to you is this, and I know you touch a lot of you from Northern Nigeria. I grew up in Northern Nigeria. I was born in the South, but all my life, even my first year, University of Maiduguri. All right. My question to you is, what is your take and understanding or the fact that, because I wanted to write about this before I left Nigeria, that this sense of alumajiri, because when I was growing up, you're talking, the time, you're talking the 70, 80, these are the people that have been rounded up, all they go to is Quranic school, but they are not being given the so-called educational aspect for them to have. Because with all my classmates, and I'm glad you talk on the subject where you talk about Borno State. That's why I went to school. I went to the school in the Chibok area. I went to government secondary school Biu, which I know the Kanuri, Babur, Bura, all those people that they're all my colleagues up to this moment. They're my friends. So the point I'm asking is, how far have we gone? That because to me, it's some sort of a fundamental issue within Northern Nigeria that we always brush off and don't know, because when you see people who are just going somewhere and they come out, because I see it when I was growing up there, all they do, they go to school and somebody allowed you or whoever's come to feed them with.
That's a huge, Mr. Michael. Thanks for that's a brilliant question, and that's a very huge problem that a lot of people. I, in my own little ways, I'm a nobody, but in my little ways, I have called attention to that. It's very dangerous, and even the current emir of Kano has talked about that, and it attracted a lot of flack for him. But the truth is this: that when you bring up children to the world and you don't care for them, and you throw them to the winds, to the elements, what happens is, one, you denude them of compassion. And when you have a compassion denuded hordes of children who grow up to be adults, they become monsters. They become very ready to be recruited into horrible things. And in Kano, for instance, you have the Yandaba. These were previous Almajiris whom the parents, just left to go to so-called earn Islamic education, which they don't, because at some point at some point, these people stop even going to the Islamic education. They are some of the most illiterate when it comes to Islam, because what the Malams do to them is to ask them to go out and look for food for the Malams, who's supposed to be teaching them. And by the time they are like 10, they stop going. They're no longer even learning the Islam, and then they drift into drugs and become a subset of the society that is very prominent in the underworld. So when politicians they want thugs to kill people, to disrupt people, to destabilize, that's a ready recruiting tool. And so any reform in northern Nigeria that does not take into account the reality of this Almajiri problem is not even a start. It's not starting anything. It's a huge problem. And now we see that many of them have gone into kidnapping because they have that's a huge population of people who have nothing to lose. And there's no one worse on earth than someone who has nothing to lose, who has nothing to live for. They don't know their parents because they were there when they were kids, and they have lost touch with anyone. So there's no sense of shame. The sense of shame we have that restrains us, that imposes moderation in us, is the fact that we don't want to disappoint our father or our mother or our brothers and sisters. When you lack that, you do anything. So it's not just Kano. It's in what do you call it, Maiduguri, that you talked about. And I read someone talking about how a lot of Boko Haram fighters in Maiduguri were actually, although it was started by the children of elites who are so spoiled that they thought that the trappings of the West was just too much. They threw away their diplomas, and they used to be called, I forget that name, the Taliban. It was a new Taliban movement. That's what they were called. And then it became Boko Haram and all of that. But the fighting force, is mostly drawn from these Almajiri people. And it's heartless to raise kids and throw them out in the cold as little as 5 years old. Those guys, they're not going to have any compassion. So that's a very good question to ask, and I agree with you entirely that that's a huge problem that cannot be overlooked.
All right, thank you, Farouk. Let's go to Stay Humble. You're next. Just a question so that we can move to other people. We're running out of time.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Rudolph. Thank you, Prof, for coming today. When I learned that you were the one to come, I, really, really wanted to be here to, have the opportunity to speak to you. Yeah, I've read your articles for the past 5-6 years. Yeah, I must say you're very cerebral, you're very thoughtful, and very resourceful, I would say. Yeah, regarding what's happening in West Africa, in the last few months or last few years, Burkina Faso. Then when you draw, when you now connect it to what's happening in Nigeria and what has happened in Nigeria in the past, the terrorism, because so how many people think that Boko Haram is sponsored by the Fulani, the Fulani people, which is see any link between Boko Haram and then foreign powers, the United States, for example. Yeah, do you see any link there? Then also for Burkina Faso and Niger and Mali, do you see the hand of Russia in what's happened there, the military coup there? And then do you see France and Russia converting West Africa to a theater of war in the near future? Thank you.
Thanks. Stay humble. I'm sure you have a real name, but that's a good name. Humility is a virtue, and it's something I cherish and hope to embody myself. And thanks for your kind words. Foreign sponsorship, this is something that I really have a hard time supporting, because it takes away agential powers from our people. That is, we are incapable of doing anything unless someone asks us to do it. I think that's another side of xenophilia. That is to say that others think for us and act for us. Boko Haram was really homegrown, and as anyone who knows any history of Nigeria will know that this is not the first time. Episodically in northern Nigeria we've had these movements. Even before colonialism, you have people, reform movements, extremist movements that come, and typically they flash in the pan and they go away. In Kano, we had the Matatsina movement. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't of age. I was probably in my preteens in the 80s when Matatsin, the Matatsin something emerged. So it's not the first time. It's always happened. And even if they're defeated, maybe if a couple is going to come and, and I will go away. I have said consistently in a lot of my scholarly interventions that the primary contradiction in northern Nigeria is religion. And the primary contradiction in southern Nigeria is ethnicity. So when the North wants to reassert itself or assert itself or do anything, religion becomes the instrument to do it almost all the time. So I'm not going to go into the details of my thesis on religion and ethnicity between the North and the South, but I'm not sure I heard if you asked if there was a link between Boko Haram and Fulani herdsmen. I think I said earlier that there's no link whatsoever, because these are completely different ethnicities that don't typically associate on any issue. There's historic animosity between the Fulani and the Kanuri. Of course, that has been resolved now, because there is what I called in one of my interventions, scholarly interventions, an ethnogenesis. There's an ethnogenesis taking place in northern Nigeria, which is that the multiplicity of ethnicities are coalescing into one huge one that is defined by Islam and the Hausa language. So increasingly, a lot of Kanuri people, the younger generation Kanuri people, speak Hausa. The Fulani people themselves are speaking Hausa, even in the Northeast. So that, I don't know how that is going to play out finally, but I prognosticated in a chapter that I contributed to a book being edited by Professor Wariboko, and I saw his comment here, where I said that in northern Nigeria in the next couple of years, that may not happen in my lifetime, but there's going to be one huge mega ethnicity. And I call that ethnogenesis. It's going to be a lot of ethnic groups that are going to hybridize. And Professor. Oh, okay, Nimi Wariboko. I thought he was the one who wrote something, but yeah.
No. He's our guest for next week.
Okay, that's right. So he and some other guy whose name I can't remember now, are coming out with a book on Nigeria, to which I contributed a chapter where I made this argument. So I don't think foreigners are needed for Boko Haram to emerge. I don't think foreigners are needed for bandits to emerge as well. We are capable of both good and bad things by ourselves. If foreigners, for some reason, intrude and try to expand it, I won't dismiss that, but I don't think it was started by that. Anyone who follows the news knows how these people make money. There's an analysis I read recently how Boko Haram has now gone into kidnapping itself, because they realized that that's a very cheap way of making money, and that they raised how many billions and how many. It was a security analyst who is himself from Maiduguri, who lives in London, that made that claim. So I don't think foreign, but to your question about whether West Africa is going to be turning to the ground for foreign powers, I think that possibility exists. But I want to say this, that I do not think that the military coups in these Sahelian states were instigated by Russia, but they may be taking advantage of them. But I don't think they were instigated by them, because again, that is going to take away our agential powers away from us. That's something that I have a hard time accepting that we have no capacity to act on our behalf. We need some other people to act for us. These objective conditions for the overthrow a lot of these so-called democracies in our continent exist. People are disappointed, people are disillusioned, and they want something new, anything, but whether this is the answer they actually need is up for debate. But the truth is, even in Nigeria, I've seen a lot of calls for the overthrow of what we have now. But whether that's I don't know. But the truth is that there's disillusion. There is.
All right. Thank you so much. Stay humble. Before I bring in Tony, let me just mention a lot of people are writing saying that they're happy to see us again. That it looks like our channel is being censored somewhere, especially in Nigeria. We've been getting those comments from people. We have not gone anywhere. We're here. So that's one reason why we tell people to share the link to the show, and that will help us. We had a guest last week who talked about Chika Odua, that her website is being censored in Nigeria. You can't see it in Nigeria. So there are a lot of things that are going on that we don't understand fully, but please share our videos and subscribe. If you subscribe, you get prompts, put notification so you know when we are live so you won't miss it. We're here every Sunday and every Saturday. Okay.
But we are not saying anything subversive here. What are they?
I don't know. People are not able to get it, and I don't know what's going on. But anyway, Tony, you're next.
Good evening, Doctor, and good evening from here, Prof, and everyone who is on the platform and those listening. Prof, first of all, let me say thank you for being here. I share the same sentiment as stay humble with respect to some of your writings. I followed you for some years now, and I quite agree with all he said about the things. Very informative, erudite, and even here I can see that. But I have a slight problem with some of the things that you have written, from Obasanjo to the present government. Reading some of your articles, I see that there's a lot of vitriol against these various governments. It doesn't seem to me as if you have given any one of them credit. Even here on this platform, you have used languages that are words that are caustic in describing some who are followers or supporters of the present government, federal government. Not that I am one, but my question is, against that background, my question is looking forward. What solutions are you going to for Nigeria, that would maybe change the present trajectory that we're seeing in terms of governance? One that would help us navigate all the challenges that we are having. That's my question.
Okay, well, thanks. I think I wrote about this some time ago, and I said, anyone who wants solutions from me I have a consultation fee for that. But seriously, though, I think Nigeria's problem transcends the identities of the people who occupy the highest positions in government. I think our problem is more structural, more systemic than personality. Right from Obasanjo until now, and this is something that I think there's not a lot of disagreement with people who really study Nigeria, which is that the West teleguides policies that we implement, and we know why that is so. Why? Because we are beneficiaries of the largesse of these people. When someone feeds you or pays for your meal, he can influence you, sometimes without even you consciously knowing. There is also the cultural cringe I talked about, which is the tendency for our people to think, hey, look, if a white man could say it, that must be true. And we see a lot of conspiracy theories by well-known crazy conspiracists in the West, in the United States, saying things about Nigeria that are completely untrue, that have no basis in fact or reality. And people say, look, that's a white man saying it. Who are you to deny it? I've seen that. Professor Okendebe was telling us recently, some time ago, about how he took his students to the University of Lagos, and everyone wanted autographs for his students. No one paid any attention to him. So it's an intrinsic, it's not that we were born that way. It's the colonial experience, it's post-colonial experience. And so people have no faith in themselves. And that's why what is happening right now, makes me happy that people, I don't know how long that's going to last, the celebration of this Ibrahim Traore, that's why it makes me happy. That I hope it's sustained. But more critically, and I'm sure you two will agree to this, that this country, Nigeria, was not intended to work by the people who set it up. I'm not saying that for the first time. A lot of people have said it. It was an extractive state. The colonial people didn't set up Nigeria for the benefit of people who live there. They set it up for the benefit of themselves. Industrialization needed raw material. And so colonialism came as the successor to capitalism. They needed it. They needed resources. And so they were basically just extracting. And that's what's called the extractive state. And when they were done, they left it. The structure still remains intact. Those of our people who took over from the colonialists merely continued with the structure as it was. That's to extract and get whatever it is that you wanted. And no one had any concern for the people. So the social contract that is supposed to regulate the relationship between the governed and the people who govern in most Western society doesn't exist. And this is not the fault of the people who are ruling necessarily. It's a fault of the state itself. Where their fault comes in is that people, we haven't come together as a people and said, look, the state we inherited was not intended to work. It was a vehicle that colonialists used to extract resources from us. And that system needs to be disbanded in place of something else that works. Nigeria's name hasn't even been changed. And it's a huge embarrassment. And our national anthem, which we managed to change, has been killed, and we went back to the colonially inherited national anthem. So how do you expect to work? How do you expect that state to work? It was never tinkered with. So if I appear to be very censorious of leaders or something, it's not because I myself will be different. To tell the truth, I've always told this people that I am not pretending that I will be any different from the people who have ruled Nigeria, because the structure, the system that sustains what we have now is still intact. Most human beings who go there can't change it. And the reason I criticize is not because I think I'm better, it's because the onlooker sees most of the game. When you are not in the field of play, you see, that's why a lot of us who watch soccer, we are always better players than those who are there. That's why you have technical advisors and coaches, because they can tell, okay, that was wrong, but when you are in the field of play, you don't see it. And everyone has a role to play. So if I'm pointing out that was wrong, that because I have the advantage of detachment, I'm not suggesting that I would have been better if I were there. And I'm not critical just for the sake of being critical. I'm hoping that somehow, maybe in association with what other people have said, maybe the people in power might be encouraged to say, look, we need a system that works for our people, not just in this generation, but subsequent generations. So let's change. So I am not saying I'm superior to them, nor that they are completely worthless. They are not. Maybe they have done some things that are right. And so I think I'll stop there.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. So we have about 5 minutes. There are so many questions on the comment section, even those that want me to ask you. Some people won't forgive me for not asking some questions. We have less than 5 minutes because our guest has to go. We convince them that it's 90 minutes. They come here and they spend 3 hours. But all right. So let me see. Let's go to Righteous Man. Just straight to your question so that we can get you and I speak the truth. Then I will ask a question from the comment section and that will be it. Go ahead, Righteous Man.
Yeah, Prof, good evening. I live in Lagos, Nigeria. And yeah, so I'm on ground. I feel the impact of mismanagement and misgovernance of this country. I once enjoyed an overseas lifestyle and I relocated here, thinking that the Nigeria I left that time, perhaps we continue to be in that line of reasoning. But I came back here, I lost everything I invested here, just trying to, make myself to not to lose life. So you've spoken well, intelligently, brilliantly. But I want to ask you, sir, in your capacity to please give me the definition of truth, facts, and good. Use it in the context of Nigeria. What is the definition of truth, facts, and good? Because your final submission really made me to believe, of which it is a belief I held strongly, that the Bible says, if the foundation be destroyed, what can the righteous do? Nigeria structured in a faulty foundation, and we try to organize a system that seems to look like democracy or governance, which in real terms, some of us that are privileged to be to live overseas and experience what democracy and governance is all about, knows that what we have here is far from democracy. So defined in the context of Nigeria, truth, what is truth in Nigeria, what is facts, and what is good? Thank you, sir.
Okay, this one my question. Well, these are, how do you define truth? Truth it's now difficult to define because people say my truth. I'm living my truth. So if someone is living their truth, what does truth really mean? It means that because traditionally we conceive of truth as that which is not amenable to manipulation, which is visible. It is the opposite of falsehood. It's self-evident. And it's built by facts. So that goes back to facts. Truth is built by facts. Facts are unimpeachable pieces of data that we use to construct the truth. And John Milton famously said that the truth does not need to be protected. That if you create a level playing field and put truth to it and release all of ideologies in the world, including falsehood, that ultimately truth will always prevail. And that's why people talk about the Miltonian conception of truth as one which sees truth as indestructible, as that which stands out, and which cannot be silenced or overshadowed or weakened by anything, including falsehood. But we live in a world where these assumptions are being challenged. That's why, someone talked about the alternative facts. We hadn't heard that expression before, alternative fact. We thought facts were facts, that there were no alternatives to it. The truth was the truth. There's no alternative to the truth. It is the truth. And that's why I'm not going to be able to say anything about Nigeria in those terms, because my truth, that's a new expression that emerged the last couple of years, may be different from your truth. And what I have said, a lot of what I've been saying are my truth. And you can see that a lot of the people who spoke here say, I don't agree with you. Almost everyone, well, I would say 80% of people have something to disagree in what I've said. So my truth may not be their truth. And so that's the world we are living in now. I'm not complaining. I think I'm just acknowledging that that's the new reality. So I think I'll probably pause here and hope that other people ask.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's get the final person before I go to the comment section for maybe one or two questions. I speak the truth. Finally, someone who speaks the truth.
Okay.
All right, Rudolph.
Maybe he's a better person to answer that question.
Not me. We've gone through this before.
All right. So,
Farouk.
go ahead.
Well, I don't have a question. I just want to say kudos to you. I thoroughly enjoyed everything you said. And whoever just doesn't want to accept it is just because they don't want to accept it, maybe like you said, based on their own biases or based on their background. I used to have a completely different opinion on you. Like I would see you on the TL and it would be one of those things that came on. I'm like, I'm not even trying to listen to this. Yeah, I never used to, because I used to think like you, like Tony said, I used to think you were unfair to the government. But now looking back in retrospect, you were actually right. You know, we're talking about the Buhari government. I used to look at you like, why is he so critical of him? Like, give him a chance. But I guess you knew things some of us were not privy to. So I just want to say today was a very beautiful show. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You taught us a lot and appreciate it. Hope we see you some other time.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much. I speak the truth. We are ending at the exact time. Before I give you the chance for final comments, if some people sent questions and, on the comment section, I can't find them anymore. But I remember one of them. One of them says, the books behind you. We talked about it before you came on air.
Yeah.
So there's a question about those books, whether I don't know what the exact question is, but whether you've read them, maybe what they are. Maybe the person is an author. He wanted to know if you have his or her book there. I don't remember the question, but tell us a little bit about the books behind you.
Oh well, this is my little home library. This is the books that I'm more likely to make reference to for my writings. They're typically here, but my office has a bigger library. But have I read all the books? Just like you, Rudolph. A lot of these books we have there, we read way more. We buy way more books than we can read. Then, it's just the nature of people who are in academia. A cool new book comes, you read the synopsis, you say, "Oh my gosh, I gotta have this," and then it comes and you realize that, oh well, there are other things that you need to do, but you keep it there anyway. And then sometimes you are writing and you remember, oh, that synopsis, that book might speak to the issue that I want to read about, and then you grab it, read a chapter, put it back there. So I like to joke that that's just for decoration. It's not to be read, but I think having books by themselves, buying them, the joy that comes from buying a new book and hoping to delve into its content, it's just by itself. It's something we do, for its own sake. So interestingly, we had a conversation about that, and he said, "Have you read all these books there?" And people asking the same, when they see his huge library, "Do you read all these books?" And I said, if I was to read all that, my brain is going to explode because that's a lot of books to read,
All right. So we have to end it here. And if you have any final thoughts, you can give it to us now. And hopefully we'll invite you again very soon before we know what will happen in 2027. Are you... yeah, go ahead. Give us your final.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a joy to be here with you and the commenters. I have also, tuned into this program even when I'm not featured. The last one I watched from the beginning to the end, Chika Odua, which was very exciting. So I'm glad to be here for the third time. And thanks for all the questions and for the opportunity to reflect on a lot of the issues that, frankly, I hadn't given a thought to. That's one of the things that I've learned about talking, is that talking sometimes helps you to crystallize ideas you hadn't even self-consciously thought about. And that's why, like in my classes, I insist that students talk or present their research, because in doing so, they crystallize thought. And in responding to questions, they are able to talk about assumptions that they hadn't self-consciously thought about. So thanks so much for the opportunity, and I hope that some other time I'll be here.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Farouk. We really enjoyed your being here. And also, I'll pass this across to you. I know I can do it privately, but let me do it openly.
Okay.
We are looking for government people. If you know any of them interested in coming here to defend the government, all the people I know, they don't want to respond to me. So if you know any of them who is willing to come, we need them to come and talk for the government. We need them to speak. Yeah. Okay. So anybody bold enough, push him to us. We will entertain him.
Okay, no problem.
All right. Thanks you so much. All right. On behalf of everybody who joined us today, I really thank all of you. I thank Speak the Truth, Righteous Man, Jefferson, Ovie, Tony.
No, I said your thanks. I know I said your thanks. No, give me my right of reply. So I the best.
I know. Also, I want to thank those that supported us. Real K, Oriako, Tope, Kulata, and thank you all for that. And we will go to the next stream where KJ will host. KJ will be the one that will now allow you to give us your feedback on what happened here today. I appreciate everybody.
Sir, I want you to bring that feedback, sir, with due respect. I want you to bring that feedback.
You want me to be there? All right, no problem. I will be there. And let me also say, next week we have Professor Wari Boko joining us. Nimi Wari Boko will join us. Please, if you can, join us too. Thank you. And
Doctor, before you go, let me suggest one format. Instead of the first 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe they ask question, bring us to Barbara for that first 2 hours. Then you go come for reaction.
No, thank you so much, Ovie.